Welcome to the True Crime Never Sleeps podcast. I'm your host, Larry Lace. Today we're going to discuss one of the most perplexing and unsolved serial killer cases in the United States, the Colonial Parkway murders. Between 1986 and 1989, 8 people were brutally murdered along a scenic parkway in the state of Virginia. The victims were young couples who were killed while parking in isolated areas along the parkway. Despite a massive investigation involving multiple agencies, the case remains unsolved and the murders have never been solved. Today's episode will provide you an overview of the case, discuss the ongoing investigation, and bring attention to the victims and their families. This case has affected not only the families of the victims, but also the entire community where it happened. We hope that this episode brings renewed attention to the case, as well as help the victims' families find closure and the perpetrator or perpetrators brought to justice. But before we get any further, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Audible, for sponsoring this episode. If you don't know, Audible is owned by Amazon, and it's your source for a massive catalog of audiobooks from any kind of genre, from historical fiction to romance to autobiographies. Check them out today, and if you want a 3-month free trial and a free audiobook of your choice, head on over to audibletrial.com/Larry21. The Colonial Parkway murders occurred between 1986 and 1989. The 8 victims were 2 couples who were killed while parked in an isolated area along the parkway. The victims were all young couples who were seemingly targeted while they were parked at pull-offs or picnic areas along the scenic parkway. The case is considered to be one of the FBI's most perplexing and longest-running serial killer investigations. The first victims were Kathleen Thomas, 27, and Rebecca Dowski, 21, who were last seen alive on October 12, 1986, at a rest area on the Colonial Parkway. Their bodies were discovered 2 days later alongside Thomas's car on a remote portion of the parkway. They had been strangled. The second victims were David Knobling at 20 and Robin Edwards, age 14, who were last seen alive on September 22nd, 1987, at a rest area on the parkway. Their bodies were discovered on October 5th, 1987, on a remote portion of the parkway. They had been shot to death. The third victims were Anna Maria Phelps and Daniel Lauer, who were last seen alive on September 5th, 1988, at a rest area on the parkway. Their bodies were discovered 3 days later on September 8th on a remote portion of the parkway. The cause of death was not immediately clear, but both had suffered injuries. The fourth victims were Keith Call and Cassandra Haley, both 18, who were last seen alive December 3rd, 1989. Their bodies were discovered almost 2 weeks later, December 15th, on a remote portion of the parkway. They had been shot to death. The cause of death in some cases wasn't immediately clear, but it's possible that the victims were targeted by a serial killer or killers. The investigation has been under scrutiny of the FBI and the Virginia State Police, and victims' families and the community are still searching for answers. It is important to note that all victims were found on remote areas of the Colonial Parkway, which is a scenic roadway that runs through Virginia, and it's also a National Park Service area, which is also another challenge for the investigation. But speaking of investigation, we're going to dive right into that. The investigation of the Colonial Parkway murders has been ongoing for over 30 years and has involved multiple agencies, including the FBI and the Virginia State Police. Initially, the investigation focused on identifying leads and suspects based on witness statements, physical evidence, and forensic analysis. A task force was formed, which included both state and federal law enforcement agencies, to investigate the case. The task force conducted numerous interviews, collected and analyzed physical evidence, and followed up on leads, but despite their efforts, no concrete suspects or leads have been identified. In recent years, advancements in forensic technology have provided new opportunities for analyzing evidence in this case. The FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program has been used to compare the Colonial Parkway murders to other unsolved cases in the country, with the hopes of identifying potential connections or suspects. Additionally, DNA analysis has been used to test evidence collected from the crime scenes, but so far has not led to any new leads. The case remains open, and the Virginia State Police and the FBI continue to investigate the murders. The agencies recently announced a new review of the case, focusing on re-examining evidence and new leads to help solve the case and bring closure to the families. Despite the ongoing investigation, the case remains unsolved, and the perpetrator or perpetrators of these murders remain at large. But it is important to note that the case is still active, and the agencies involved are still working on it, which gives hope to the victims' families that the case might be solved in the future. And I personally believe that someday soon, I would say, maybe not this year, but within the next 5 years, they'll find somebody. I mean, there's been a crackdown on killers through the DNA analysis. It's getting better. The technology is more advanced, and more people are using the genealogy platforms that are available to test your DNA, which then leads to families being tied to serial killers and police using that information. But let us know in the comments section below. Do you think this case will be solved? You got any theories on who it could be? Let us know. So in this episode, we provided an overview of the Colonial Parkway murders, which occurred between 1986 and 1989, and remaining one of the most perplexing and unsolved serial killer cases in the United States. We discussed the background of the case, details about the victims, and the specific murders that occurred, as well as the ongoing investigation and its challenges. It's important to remember that the victims and their families are still seeking closure and justice, and the case remains active and ongoing. The investigation of the Colonial Parkway murders continues to this day, with multiple agencies, including the FBI and the Virginia State Police, still working on this case. We hope this episode brought renewed attention to the case and will help to keep it in the public consciousness, as new leads and developments may come from public attention. If you have any information about these murders, you're asked to contact the Virginia State Police or the FBI. And if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. Your support helps the channel grow, upgrade our equipment, and hopefully take this show on the road. And as always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We will see you next time.
Before we dive into today's episode, we'd like to remind you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Just search True Crime Never Sleeps. Without further ado, let's dive right into today's episode. The Glico Morinaga case, a kidnapping in a country's food supply, held hostage in Japan. On March 18th, 1984, just after 9 p.m., masked kidnappers armed with guns entered the home of 42-year-old Tsuiza Izaki, president of the Izaki Glico Company, known most simply as Glico. Though the company sold everything from ice cream to hamburger meat, they were best known for sweets such as Pocky chocolates and Glico caramels. They boasted that their products were made with health-boosting oyster glycogen, which would promote a stronger populace. The kidnappers gained entry after forcing their way into the residence of Izaki's mother. They bound and gagged her before taking her spare keys and using them to gain entrance to the Izaki home next door to her. There they dragged Izaki out of his tub mid-bath. His wife and children were bound, gagged, and left behind, while a still naked Izaki was forced out to the house and shoved into a vehicle waiting outside. Izaki was taken to the Iberikali warehouse along the river docks as his kidnappers demanded their ransom. They requested 1 billion yen, nearly $9 million today, and 220 pounds of gold bullion. The large ransom and prominence of the victim became a subject of much speculation and intrigue among the citizens of Japan, especially in a country where crime was low and the police forces were known to resolve what crimes did take place quickly. The kidnappers referenced themselves as the monster with 21 faces and eluded police detection like no other criminal enterprise before them ever had. The name seemed to be modeled from a fictional shape-shifting thief in the 1936 detective novel The Fiend with the 20 Faces. A story from Edgar Allan Poe. Apparently, the Osaka extortion ring central to this case needed one more face to stump local police forces, which they seemed to do quite well. In fact, the Glico Morinaga case, which included the kidnapping and other extortions, holds a place in history as the first case in which the Japan's National Police Agency made not one single arrest. There is no doubt that it must have been frustrating for a police force so well known for its high-rated case disposal. They could only have been even more annoyed by the taunting of the kidnappers, who amused themselves by rubbing salt in the wounds of not only the NPA, but also the media and Glico's corporate offices. Over the year-and-a-half period that followed Izaki's kidnapping, the culprits would send over 100 letters mocking the police. One such letter, translated from Japanese, says, quote, "Are you idiots? If you were pros, you would catch us." The letter went on to mock police and give them hints as if they weren't capable of solving the crime without help from the very people perpetrating it. They told them that the getaway car was gray and the food they purchased for Izaki was from the DA supermarket. Apologies for butchering all these names wrong. The letter was signed Kajin Nuchiachi Minso. Rough translation into English is The Monster with 21 Faces. Newspapers printed the letter. Over the months to come, they would continue to print the letters they received from the group, who seemed to be greatly amused by their taunts, jokes, and useless supply of clues. Though police had locked down Osaka and put up multiple roadblocks after the Izaki kidnapping, they came up empty-handed in capturing the kidnappers or finding any trace of Izaki. Fortunately for him, he managed to escape after being held for what must have seemed like a very long 65 hours to him. It was a relief to all to find him free, unharmed, and without the outlandish ransom being paid. 3 weeks after Izaki's escape, 6 vehicles parked in front of Glico's corporate offices were set on fire. A little under a week after that, a container filled with hydrochloric acid and a threatening note addressed to Izaki was discovered at the warehouse where the Glico president had been held captive. It sent a clear message that the ordeal was not yet over. It seemed to only be the beginning as the monster with 21 faces began to reveal their real goal. The ransom money hadn't mattered to them. It was the food supply they were after. The monster with 21 faces wanted the people to believe that the Glico food products they had been told were wholesome and healthy for years weren't so safe after all. They began sending letters to various Osaka news outlets, letting him know that the Glico-produced candy brands were laced with cyanide. There was widespread panic as retailers across the country began pulling all Glico products from their shelves. Supermarkets and other outlets gathered up the unsold products and urged citizens to return any they may have at home. The massive recall cost Glico somewhere in the neighborhood of $21 million and forced them to lay off hundreds of employees. Their stock prices nosedived. And after the chaos of the moment had passed, it came to light that not a single trace of cyanide was ever found in any of the products. Even after Izaki's escape and the candy scare, the group continued with their little game of cat and mouse, continuing to send out letters that included clues. One even included information about what sort of typewriter they were using to type the letters being sent. But mostly they lambasted the NPA for their ineptitude. By June, the group had shifted their focus from Glico to another candy company called Morinaga. The reason they gave for this was that they felt bad for a kid in their group who was sad over a lack of Glico candy in the marketplace. Saying, quote, "In our group, there's also a 4-year-old kid. Every day he cries for Glico. It's a drag to make a kid cry because he's deprived of the candy he loves." The monster with 21 faces declared that Izaki had gone around being ashamed for long enough that they were now going to forgive it. They indicated that Japan was getting hot and humid and they intended to move on to Europe, even teasing that they would, quote, "be in one of those places. Let's bring Pocky, the traveler's friend, delicious Glico products. We're eating them too. See you in January of next year." Unfortunately, the monster with 21 faces did not stop terrorizing Japan, as they said they would. It was only Glico that was off the hook. They immediately moved on to another supplier. They called up the Morinaga candy and demanded a sum equal to $400,000. Morinaga didn't comply. This resulted in a new letter being sent to news offices across the country. It roughly translated as, quote, "To moms throughout Japan. In autumn, when appetites are strong, sweets are really delicious, When you think of sweets, no matter what you say, it's Morinaga. We've added some special flavor. The flavor of potassium cyanide is a little bitter. It won't cause tooth decay, so buy the sweets for your kids. We've detached a notice on these bitter sweets that they contain poison. We put 20 boxes in stores from Hakata to Tokyo. This began a bit of a treasure hunt for Morinaga candy that had been laced with cyanide. This time, they weren't lying. There truly was cyanide in the candy. Police found boxes of Morinaga choco balls and angel pies with extra labels applied. The labels read, "Danger, contains poison. You'll die if you eat this." Signed, the monster with 21 faces. And just in case that wasn't a big enough threat, the group sent letters to the media, assuring the public that there would be no labels the next time. Now, Morinaga was the one suffering from the group's need to sow the seeds of chaos and disrupt the food supply. Stores boycotted their products and their stock prices dropped roughly 22%. They weren't the only victims now, though. Dozens of other food companies began to receive their threatening letters. The monster with 21 faces also extorted money on a routine basis from different food suppliers, but never showed up to retrieve any of it, though there seemed to have been one close call when they attempted to do so. When a suspect near a drop-off location in a Tokyo train station eluded capture, Superintendent Yamamoto of Shiga Prefecture took the failure of his department so personally that he committed suicide in a harrowing fashion. On August 7th, 1985, he stepped into his backyard, doused himself with kerosene, and lit himself on fire. The monster with 21 faces mocked his death in what would be their final letter, saying, quote, "Don't let bad guys like us get away with it. There are many more fools who want to copy us. No career Yamamoto died like a man, so we decided to give our condolences. We decided to forget about torturing food companies. If anyone blackmails any of the food-making companies, it's not us, but someone copying us. We are bad guys, which means we've got more to do than bullying companies. Fun to lead a bad man's life." With that, the monster with 21 faces stepped back into the shadows, never to be heard from again. Throughout the investigation into this case, police interviewed at least 125,000 suspects. Yakuza, disgruntled Glico employees, stock manipulators, North Korean secret agents, and even the original kidnapped victim himself, Izaki Glico. Each one was considered and cleared of any crimes. But numerous theories came from the interviews. Unfortunately, none of them panned out into answers. There seemed to be only two real clues during the entire investigation. The first, a man showed up on a security camera video around the time threats were being issued about the cyanide-laced candy. He became known as the videotaped man. He was wearing a Yomiuri Giants baseball hat and was placing a Glico chocolate on the store shelf. In the second, police impersonated Maridai employee to deliver a ransom demand made of the company and hopefully catch someone attempting to pick it up. While riding on the train to the drop point, the officer took note of a large, fit man acting suspiciously. He was referenced as the fox-eyed man due to his large fox-like eyes. Though he was followed by police, they eventually lost him. He was subsequently spotted again in an exchange set up for ransom money from the House Food Corporation, but once again escaped capture. After the group stopped sending harassing food suppliers and the police, they eventually faded into the background. Metropolitan designated Case 114, known to the public, the Glico Morinaga case was officially closed. In the end, no one was poisoned. No money exchanged hands. No one was caught. Nearly 38 years later, the identity of the person or people behind the monster with 21 faces remains a mystery, but that hasn't stopped folks from continuing their attempts to crack this case. If you're interested in a much more in-depth look at this case, check out the podcast dedicated to it, Monster with 21 Faces website, which is the Monster with 21 Faces.com with 21 in digits. So it's the Monster with 21 Faces.com. Let us know your thoughts on this case in the comments section below. Do you think we'll ever figure out who the monster with 21 faces is? And if you have any theories, leave them in the comments. give it a thumbs up if you like our video, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell notification button to be notified of future videos. If you want to support the channel, buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. Your support helps the channel grow, upgrade our equipment, bring in new hosts, be able to pay them, and hopefully one day take the show on the road. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We will see you next time.
We hope you enjoy the videos we are providing you this year. And as always, please consider supporting the channel so we can keep this content growing. You can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. And as always, give us a thumbs up, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell notification button to be notified of future videos. If you can't afford to give, we understand during this holiday season, consider just leaving us a review or a comment or a like, or send us a tweet and let us know where you're watching from.
Before we dive into today's story, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. Just search True Crime Never Sleeps. And of course, give us a thumbs up if you like our videos. And please, if you want to support the channel, you can go ahead and click that subscribe button and hit the bell notification button to be notified of future videos. So without further ado, let's dive into today's Cold Case Friday. Harry Houdini was born Eric Huis in Hungary in 1874. When he was 4, he emigrated to the U.S. with his mother Cecilia and 4 brothers to meet with his father Herman, who had already moved to the U.S. a few years before. They settled in the town of Appleton, Wisconsin, where his father was a rabbi at a small Reformed congregation. The family's relative poverty imprinted a drive to be successful in the boy who would be Houdini. By the age of 9, in part to help support his family, Eric began working as a trapeze performer in circuses. In 1882, his family moved to New York City, where Eric began performing in vaudeville shows, then considered to be the top of the entertainment pyramid, though at first Eric didn't make much impact. In 1891, a 17-year-old Eric and friend Jacob Hyman created an act that included a basic set of card and magic tricks called the Brothers Houdini. In 1892, after the death of Eric's father, the Brothers Houdini took their show on the road, performing at dime museums and small theaters. In 1894, Eric married 18-year-old Wilhelmina Beatrice Rayner, or Bess, who became his stage assistant. The pair toured as the Houdinis, but life as traveling performers was hard. In 1898, the 25-year-old Houdini considered quitting the business altogether, burnt out from years on the road. In 1899, while performing in a beer garden in St. Paul, Minnesota, Houdini caught the attention of one Martin Beck, a man of influence in the world of vaudeville. After watching Houdini escape from a pair of handcuffs, Beck gave Houdini a pair of his own handcuffs to try to escape from. Houdini did so with ease. Impressed, Beck put the Houdinis on the influential Orpheum vaudeville circuit, which meant the husband and wife would perform fewer shows but for more money. Houdini's profile began to rise as an escape artist, and he gained admiration for his skill at manipulating looks and pure brute strength. Houdini also attracted thousands for the pure drama and showmanship of his performance. A typical act would see Houdini bound with chains and tossed in a box that was locked, roped, and weighted, which would then be tossed into water. Houdini, of course, escaped every time. In 1908, Houdini premiered his infamous milk can trick. First, a milk can filled with water was inspected by audience members. A handcuffed Houdini was then squeezed into the milk can, which was sealed with 6 padlocks. A curtain was drawn, and the audience held their breath along with the submerged magician. Within 2 minutes, Houdini would somehow break free and emerge from behind the milk can with it still padlocked. In his lifetime, no one ever knew how he did it. Houdini had a penchant for not just creating his own amazing illusions, but performing other magicians' tricks as well, only better. For instance, British magician Charles Morett pioneered a trick where he made a live donkey disappear on stage. Houdini paid Morett for the rights to perform the trick and then figured out how to do it, but with an elephant. According to John Cox, author of the Houdini website Wild About Harry, once said, quote, "We still don't know how he did the elephant trick. He would Houdinize these more common feats of magic. His mind was always innovating and always inventing. Part of the reason why more than 100 years later we still don't know the exact tricks behind his performances is because he guarded his secrets so well. Though he was weary of imitators, Houdini didn't patent his tricks, since in the patent process, he would have to give a detailed explanation for how they worked. These explanations would be publicly available and therefore destroy the magic. To get around this, for his Chinese water torture cell trick, Houdini staged the trick on stage in England as a one-act play with only a single person in the audience. This allowed him to copyright the act instead of patenting it, meaning no one else could perform the trick, and how he pulled it off remained a secret. While Houdini cultivated an air of mystery around his death-defying feats, he never claimed his abilities to be supernatural. In fact, Houdini grew to detest claims of otherworldly powers, becoming one of the leading critics of the spiritualist movement that was gaining momentum in Europe and the US in the wake of World War I. In the 1890s, Houdini and his wife Bess dabbled in practicing spiritualism, attempting to summon the dead in public after researching names at local graveyards. It didn't take long for Houdini to realize the entire practice was nonsense. According to famous magician Teller, he once said, quote, "When you are a professional magician, you want to see your art respected for what it is, not misused to mislead people about the universe." Houdini would ultimately go on to attend seances undercover, exposing the mediums as simply skilled performers. He would also recreate their tricks at his own shows, asserting there was nothing supernatural about it. In all, Houdini spent years attempting to expose mind readers and mediums as con artists, duping an otherwise ignorant audience who might be suffering genuine grief. And while mediums and seances were no strangers to public doubts, Houdini's vendetta was personal. In 1913, while Houdini was in Sweden to perform for their royal family, Cecilia Weiss, Houdini's mother, passed away. Houdini, a self-proclaimed mother's boy, was reportedly so stricken by the news that he fainted and wept uncontrollably. In the aftermath, though, he had already concluded personally that spiritualism was a con. He nevertheless searched in vain for a real medium to try to contact his deceased mother. In 1922, Houdini was invited to a seance being held by Lady Doyle, the wife of his friend Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes. Sir Doyle believed through spiritualism he could communicate directly with his son Kingsley, who had tragically died in the 1918 influenza epidemic. Further, Sir Doyle believed Houdini himself possessed supernatural abilities, something Houdini adamantly denied. Nevertheless, it appears Sir Doyle's admiration for Houdini's otherworldly gifts was at least partially the reason why the two celebrities' friendships began. At the seance conducted by Lady Doyle, held at the Ambassador Hotel in Atlantic City, the hostess rapped on the table 3 times and claimed to be in contact with Houdini's mother. Lady Doyle wrote out 15 pages of messages for Houdini, who thanked the Doyles and left quietly. While many may have scoured the pages for some comfort from a loved one beyond the grave, Houdini seethed. The pages were all in English, a language his mother never spoke. The seances with the Doyles seemed to have been the final straw for Houdini, who now set out to expose spiritualists as frauds with renewed determination. Houdini had already written a book, Miracle Mongers and Their Methods, a complete expose of the modus operandi of fire eaters, heat resistors, poison eaters, venomous reptile defiers, sword swallowers, human ostriches, strongmen, etc., which exposed the tricks and trades of various sideshow-level acts claiming miraculous feats. Houdini followed the book up with A Magician Among the Spirits, a scathing expose on the spiritualist trickery. He also went forward with a 40-page illustrated pamphlet dedicated to taking down one popular medium in particular, Boston's Mina Crandon, also known as Marjorie. The pamphlet was appropriately titled, quote, Houdini Exposes the Tricks Used by the Boston Medium Marjorie. Houdini had also began lecturing around the country about fraudulent spiritualistic phenomena, going so far as to testify before Congress in 1926, lobbying for a bill to regulate mediums and fortune tellers, potentially threatening to charge those pretending to tell fortunes for reward and compensation with a crime. Unfortunately for Houdini, this campaign would be short-lived. On October 11th, 1926, Houdini broke his left ankle during a performance in Albany, New York. Being a goddamn professional, Houdini finished the performance and went against doctor's orders by traveling to his next set of performances in Montreal. One evening in Montreal, Houdini began to complain of stomach cramps. During a 15-hour train ride to his next show in Detroit, Houdini was in a great deal of pain, both from his stomach and his shattered ankle, arriving in the Motor City with a 104-degree fever. The doctor was brought to the theater and diagnosed Houdini with acute appendicitis, and told the magician he needed to get to the hospital immediately. Houdini refused, apparently declaring, "I'll do this show if it's my last." Houdini made it through the show, and eventually his wife convinced him finally to go to a hospital. On October 24th, Houdini had an emergency operation to remove his already burst appendix. He underwent a second operation on October 28th, but on October 31st, 1926, Harry Houdini succumbed to a severe case of sepsis. And now there are plenty of theories trying to explain this death of Harry Houdini, and we're going to take a look at some of them. So first off, is Whitehead's meathead desire to hit another person accidentally caused the appendicitis that led to Houdini's demise. However, according to a 2013 study in the World Journal of Emergency Surgery, appendicitis as the result of blunt force trauma is extremely rare, to the extent there is still debate whether it could ever happen. Of course, there's still the possibility that Houdini was developing appendicitis independently of the punches. Either way, this theory postulates that Houdini was simply the victim of random bad luck and that refusing medical treatment certainly did not help matters. Next up, Whitehead was an assassin sent to try to murder Houdini by punching him to death. Houdini had no shortage of enemies, whether it was the other magicians he was constantly belittling, the individual mediums he was targeting, discrediting, or the entire field of spiritualism that he was lobbying to make illegal. Perhaps someone got fed up with Houdini and wanted to prevent him from doing any more damage. Admittedly, this theory is a little weak. As we already said, trauma-caused appendicitis, if it even exists at all, is rare. So it would be a pretty ineffective assassin who chooses that as their preferred means of murder. And finally, someone from the spiritualist underworld poisoned Houdini while he was in the hospital. We already mentioned the spiritualist community's potential motivation for assassination, and according to a Houdini biography entitled The Secret Life of Houdini, poisoning was a preferred method of murder. Despite receiving death threats, Houdini and Bess traveled without security. Apart from explaining why random med school students could punch him on a whim, this means that there would have been plenty of opportunity for a spiritualist with a syringe to get to a Houdini while he recovered from surgery. Houdini was buried without an autopsy, meaning there is no evidence to disprove or prove this theory. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. What do you really think happened to Harry Houdini? Was it murder? Was it an accident? Or did he just die from a burst appendix? Let us know. Of course, if you want to support the channel financially, you can go ahead and buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. As always, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and let's keep the conversation going on Twitter. Just use the hashtag TCNS podcast and give us your thoughts on the cases we cover. And as always, you can find us on Good Pods and any of your favorite podcast platforms. So thank you for watching and listening. We will see you next time. The Crime Never Sleeps podcast. I'm your host, Larry Lease. On today's episode of Cold Case Friday, we dive into the strange death of Michelle von Emster. But before we do that, we'd like to remind you, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search True Crime Never Sleeps. And as always, give us a thumbs up if you like our videos. And without further ado, let's dive right in, shall we? On April 15th, 1994, on Sunset Cliff in San Diego, California, two surfers noticed what appeared to be seagulls on top of a floating pile of kelp. However, as they drew closer, they discovered that it was the body of Michelle von Emster. Michelle was found naked with only a brass bracelet on her left arm. along with 2 rings. She had a butterfly tattoo on her shoulder and long brown hair. The body was taken to San Diego lifeguard headquarters at 4 p.m. Her lack of clothing was attributed to Michelle being reported to go on naked midnight swims, which a lifeguard had seen her doing, in which a work acquaintance, Edwin Decker, supported, saying that Michelle had told him that she liked to surf naked. However, no local surfers nor her friends ever recalled her surfing. Robert Engel, medical examiner, reported that she had large tearing-type wounds missing tissue, as the body was also missing its right leg from the thigh down. He also believed Michelle had not been in the water a long time, but did not mark down a cause of death. A day later, on April 16th, an autopsy was performed by Brian Blackburn, a San Diego medical examiner. He discovered that Michelle's neck had been broken, as, quote, if she'd been in a car wreck, and had broken ribs, scrapes, and bruises. Sand was also found in her mouth, throat, lungs, and stomach. He concluded that Michelle had been alive while the injuries had been inflicted and created a timeline. At 8 p.m., April 14th, Michelle had last been sighted wearing a green trench coat, and at midnight, she had likely entered the water. Blue sharks also fed on her body, although Harry Bonnell, a pathologist, stated that there was no evidence these bites occurred before her death. Glenn Wagner, a medical examiner who re-examined her body in 2008, agreed with this, saying that blue sharks scavenged her body after she died. Only 2 suspects were seriously considered, Edwin Decker and an unknown stalker. Decker was suspected because of his interaction with Michelle and behavior towards the case, and the stalker because he had been sighted by Michelle watching her. Blackburn decided that the case must have been a shark attack due to agreement from marine biologists at Scripps Institute, and Harper Police, and it was marked as an official cause of death. It was unknown where Michelle was buried. So now we're going to dive into some of the theories around this death. Michelle von Emster died as a result of a shark attack, so they say. This theory was a general consensus and backed by Brian Blackburn, medical examiner, and marine biologist in Harper Police. Like we previously said, the autopsy revealed that Michelle had a broken neck and ribs, along with sand in her mouth, throat, lungs, and stomach, and scrapes and bruises along her body. Lined up with this theory that a great white shark may have grabbed Michelle, bit off her leg, and forced her to the bottom of the ocean, breaking her neck and filling her mouth with sand, which she subsequently choked on and swallowed. Then she would have died from blood loss and drowning. However, Blackburn had never seen a death caused by a shark attack before, and neither had anyone who had looked at the body. The marine biologist that had agreed with him had never seen the body. This could make their consensus questionable, due to the lack of interaction with shark attack cases and the body. Ralph Collier, leading expert in Pacific Coast white shark behavior and ecology, seeing Michelle's broken leg bone, remarked, quote, when a white shark breaks off part of a limb, the break is clean, almost like you put it on a table saw. What remained of Michelle's femur was anything but. It looked like what happens when you get a piece of bamboo and whittle it down to a point with a knife. I've looked at close to 100 photos of cases over the years, and I've never seen any bones that come to a point. He also said that it was strange for Michelle to have sand in her stomach after her leg had been severed, saying, quote, the damage would have severed her femoral artery and she would have bled to death quickly. But for her to have sand in her stomach, she had to take a big gulping breath as she made contact with the sand. He finishes with, there are too many things in this case that are not consistent with a white shark behavior. Richard Rosenblatt, the chairman of Scripps Institute at the time, after being given the measurements of the injuries, said that none of them were caused by a white shark, and that if she had been bitten by one, they most likely would have found a great white shark tooth in her body, which they had not. Rosenblatt finished by saying that because Michelle's leg was missing, quote, it could only have been a white shark, and not any other type of shark. If only a white shark could have taken the leg, and it was proven unlikely that a white shark had made the attack, it was unlikely altogether that Michelle had been killed by a white shark. Another theory, Michelle von Emster died as a result of drowning. Her lack of clothes would be explained as a midnight naked swim, an injury caused by being caught in the current, where she would have been knocked against the rocks, died, and then fed upon by blue sharks. However, the temperature of the water was too cold to swim, at 59 degrees Fahrenheit and the temperature at night being 57 degrees. A counter for this, however, is that she could have been wearing the green trench coat, and possibly nothing underneath for protection against the cold, and then had taken it off for the swim. The third theory is that Michelle von Emster died as a result of fall from Sunset Cliffs. The San Francisco medical examiner declared that her neck, rib, and pelvic injuries were consistent with those of a fall. Sunset Cliffs is known as one of the most beautiful sightseeing cliffs in San Diego, but is also known to be dangerous with reports of crumbling rocks. People have died in this spot before. However, falling off a cliff would not explain her leg injury. And then our final theory is that Michelle von Emster was murdered, generally being that somebody hurt her badly, left her to die in the ocean, and planted her purse away from her in order to make it look like an accident. Another variation is that she was drowned by this person. The neighborhood that Michelle lived in had a reputation for drugs and was known as the war zone. Michelle's purse was found about 2.5 miles away from her body, containing her keys, driver's license, makeup, pay stub, and a fanny pack with $27 in cash. It was discovered on a heavily used stretch of beach, meaning it probably wouldn't have been there long, or else someone else would have taken it. Edwin Decker may have murdered Michelle. Decker worked as a bartender next to the coffee shop that she had once worked at. He claimed that he and Michelle had drank April 13th after flirting for weeks and had kissed in his apartment. According to his testimony, she left his apartment at 5 a.m. the next day, the day she died. Decker felt that, quote, there was a total intellectual connection. I felt that there was an emotional connection too. At least on my part. There was, and we also had a physical connection. I was so bummed when a couple of days went by and she hadn't called. I was about to give up on the idea. Decker even published a poem after finding that she had died, which read, quote, the report said there was a tattoo, a butterfly on her shoulder, which I remembered that night on my couch when I, like the shark, chewed on her lips and took off her shirt. However, Decker also teamed up with an investigator in 2008 and wrote to the San Diego Medical Examiner asking them to reevaluate Michelle's case. An unknown stalker may have murdered Michelle, who had noticed him stalking her at her previous job at a coffee shop. Michelle had turned to a different job at a stationery and office supply shop because she felt he wouldn't stalk her there. Michelle also mentioned that she did not know the man, but knew he drove a motorcycle. Her former boss, Denise Knox, recalled that the day after Michelle's death, a man came in to make copies of her autopsy report. In 2014, she told the San Diego Reader that, quote, the weird guy who wanted all those copies of her autopsy, he rode a motorcycle too. Let us know in the comments section below, what do you think happened to Michelle? Was it a murder? Was it a shark attack? Or did she fall from the cliff? Let us know. Of course, go ahead, please consider supporting the channel and help us grow. Go to buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. Your support is very much appreciated. And as always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We will see you next time. Welcome to the True Crime Never Sleeps podcast. I'm your host, Larry Elise, and on today's episode of Cold Case Friday, we dive into the Walker family murders. Were the murderous duo of Truman Capotes in cold blood responsible for the slaughter of his second family? Stay tuned and find out. But first, a word from our... This episode is brought to you by Skillshare. Hey folks, I've got something super cool to share. I've recently dived into Skillshare, and man, what a transformation it's been. It's not just an online learning platform, it's a hub of inspiration. I stumbled across this photography course, right? Always thought I had an eye for it, but never really explored it. So I dove in, and now I can't stop clicking. From creative angles to understanding lighting, my Insta game has leveled up for sure. Seriously, whether it's photography, digital art, entrepreneurship, or another passion lurking inside you, Skillshare's got it covered. So go on, unlock your potential, and join Skillshare. It's a journey you won't forget. Use the link in the description and support the channel. Before we dive into today's episode, we'd like to remind you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Just search True Crime Never Sleeps podcast. Now let's dive into today's cold case. December 20th, 1959 was seemingly an ordinary morning in Osprey, Florida. The town is small, comprising of just a few thousand people, and residents enjoyed the relative peace that comes alongside that. Daniel McLeod rose at his ranch and began to set about his day. It was cold, but not expressly so, and he was headed to meet his friend and co-worker, Cliff Walker, to go hog hunting. He hooked up his horse trailer, loaded his horse, and set off in good spirits for the day ahead. Parking his truck outside the Walker family home on the 100,000 acres Palmer Ranch, McLeod will have noticed the darkness emanating from the house. It was quiet, which was odd as the family was known to rise early. McLeod knocked at the front door, getting increasingly louder as he became more alarmed at the lack of response. He had initially believed the family had simply slept in, amused as his friend was also known to be a habitual early riser. After calling out and making further attempts to ascertain the problem, Daniel looked further around the property. He noted the family car was not in its usual position, and there were both a cut log and Christmas gifts laying on the porch. Peering through the windows, there was a very dim light on inside. Somebody was inside, but ignoring his calls. He realized something must be wrong in the house and took the decision to enter, cutting through the screen door. Even the worst fears of his imagination couldn't have prepared him for the carnage that greeted him. The entire Walker family was dead, all murdered, including the children. There were still gifts underneath the Christmas tree. Cliff, 25, lived with his wife Christine, 24, and their two young children, Jimmy, 3, and Debbie, 1. The family was young and growing and looks said to be pillars of the community for many years to come. However, now Christine lay in a pool of blood at the entrance to the living room. Cliff and Jimmy were slumped in the corner, and upstairs, Debbie lay in a blood-filled bath. McLeod hastily ran from the house and called the police. Working at the scene, police began to search the home for evidence, and soon discovered that items were missing. Some of them seemed quite bizarre. Christine's high school majorette uniform was gone, as was Cliff's pocket knife. However, most unusually, the couple's marriage license had been stolen, leading some to suspect that perhaps an old flame of Christine's had come to carry out an act of terrible revenge on the young husband and wife. Alongside the items missing, there was also a significant amount of evidence left at the scene by the culprit. There was a bloody and discarded cowboy boot, a cellophane strip from a cigarette wrapper, and a fingerprint on the bathtub faucet. Reconstructing events, police ascertained that the family had been out running errands and believed that Christine arrived home first, around 4 p.m., on Saturday, December 19th. Entering, she wasn't attacked straight away and had enough time to store the groceries before she was ambushed by the assailant or assailants. Whether they were already in the house or Christine let them in is unknown for sure. But it seems likely the reason the family car was in a different location is that somebody else had parked in the family spot. This didn't alarm Christine, and logically the occupant of that car was then known to her, letting them in before being attacked. She fought viciously, using her high-heeled shoes and staining them with blood, even making it out of the house before being dragged back inside. Then she was taken to Jimmy's bedroom and raped on the bed before being shot with a .22 firearm. Christine was likely still struggling at this point as the first bullet barely grazed her. The second one didn't miss. Not long afterward, Cliff also returned home with Jimmy and Debbie. Cliff was shot in the face immediately, followed by Jimmy, the young boy eating a lollipop he'd been bought as a treat. But Jimmy didn't die. Mortally wounded, he crawled to his dead father, seeking his protection. The killer put 2 more bullets in the back of the child's skull. Now the killer turned to Debbie and shot her too. It seems likely that Debbie also somehow survived. Out of ammunition, the killer took the baby to the bathroom and drowned her in the bathtub. Whether the 1-year-old's death came from the bullet wound or the water was never ascertained. It seems also almost sure that there was more than one attacker, with forensic evidence discovering a dark-colored hair in the bathroom and a long blonde hair inside Christine Walker's dress. Initial suspects in the case included Daniel McLeod himself, a local by the name of Wilbert Tooker, and a cousin of Cliff by the name of Elbert Walker. McLeod passed a polygraph and was quickly eliminated in any case. Meanwhile, Tooker was seen as a local pervert, having tried to kiss Christine in the past, and regularly making indecent propositions. Cliff had threatened to kill him, but he had a watertight alibi for the time of the murders. Elbert, on the other hand, would be on the police radar for some time. Described as wild, he was violent and boisterous when drunk, many believing him to be mentally unwell. Elbert had also previously made advances towards Christine, and family members thought the grief shown was fake. the suspect feigning twice at the funeral. He passed a polygraph, and even though there was significant controversy over the validity of early tests in 2006, Elbert was eliminated through DNA. However, the best suspect at the time was possibly Curtis McCall, a man described as a troublemaker with a history of violence. Local gossip was that McCall was engaged in an affair with Christine Walker, and he was known to own a .22 caliber gun. Brought in for questioning, McCall denied having any romantic interest in Christine and evasively said he had sold the weapon not long ago. McCall underwent 3 separate polygraph tests, and during each one, the suspect was so nervous that they all ended inconclusively. Yet the test showed that he was highly likely lying when asked if he'd withheld information. Just a few months after the massacre, bloody clothing from the Walker home was uncovered in a shed not far away. The items, including shirts, a blouse, and pants, belonged to Cliff and Christine, were all soaked. Police theorized that they had been grabbed and used to wipe the blood off the killer or killers. The discovery was interesting, as it would be unlikely that a stranger to the area would know the shed. In all, hundreds of suspects were interviewed and given polygraphs. The leads went nowhere, and the case was soon going cold, until police believed they had a break in 1962, when serial killer Emmett Monroe Spencer claimed responsibility. Yet Spencer was a known pathological liar, and his claims were soon dismissed as a false confession by Sarasota County Sheriff Ross Boyer. However, it's possible that the police already had the killers in custody. In the early hours of November 15th, 1959, Perry Smith and Richard Hickok, entered the Clutter family home in Holcomb, Kansas. Smith and Hickok had recently been released from the Kansas State Penitentiary. Hickok's former cellmate had worked for the Clutters, telling him that the father, Herb, kept a large amount of cash on the premises. He soon concocted a plan to rob the family safe and flee to Mexico, enlisting Smith, who had also been his cellmate. The duo entered the home and through an unlocked back door in search for the safe, the family remaining asleep. They didn't find it. Herb, in reality, did all his business by check, and there was no safe. Agreed, the 2 robbers woke the family. Herb, 48, his wife Bonnie, 45, their 2 teenage children, Nancy, 16, and Kenyon, 15. All 4 were bound and gagged as the search continued. They found nothing. Determined not to leave any witnesses, Smith cut Herb Clutter's throat, then shot him. One by one, Kenyon, Nancy, and Bonnie were executed with a shotgun blast to the head. Smith stopped his friend from raping Nancy first, but was likely responsible for pulling the trigger on all 4 killings. The pair got away with a radio, a set of binoculars, and less than $50. While the killers were still at large, legendary writer Truman Capote learned of the killings and decided to write about the slaughter, traveling to Kansas alongside childhood friend Harper Lee, author of To Kill a Mockingbird. Together, they interviewed hundreds of locals and the investigators working on the case. The notes for the planned book ran to 8,000 pages. The culprits were eventually arrested 6 weeks after the killings in Las Vegas and ultimately executed by hanging on April 14, 1965. The year afterward, Capote published the book. It would be arguably the most significant true crime work of all time, in cold blood. However, while both Smith and Hickok would be dead and buried by the time Capote released his book, they were still very much at large. On December 19, 1959, indeed, the Walker family killings are given several pages in cold blood, the author dismissing any connection. However, in 2012, the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office once again began to look into a possible link, having originally considered them suspects as early as 1960, around the time of their arrest. The pair were among the many suspects given a polygraph, which they both passed, being dismissed from the inquiry. Capote had insisted that the pair had an alibi for the time of the killings. Still, Kansas and Florida investigators have contended that there are flaws in the account, with some witnesses standing against the alibi. After the slaughter at the Clutter family farm, the duo had stolen a car and began to make their way to Florida, headed for Miami. They were seen a dozen times on the way. Arriving in Miami Beach, the pair was located just 4 hours away from the Walker family home and checked out of their motel the morning of the killings. When they were arrested, they had a pocket knife similar to the one described as missing from Cliff Walker's body. At the time of the murders, the Walkers had been thinking about buying a 1956 Chevrolet Bel Air. and this was the same car that Smith and Hickok had stolen back in Kansas, using it during their flight across the country. Knowing they were seen throughout the state looking for work, investigators have theorized that the duo bumped into the Walker family and got talking or simply contacted them, either way under the pretense that they were planning on selling the vehicle. Arriving at the house when Christine was alone, she wouldn't have suspected their real intention. The same day, they were positively identified at a department store just a few miles away. One of them had a scratched face. There have been minor developments in the case in the years since the scent went cold. For example, in '94, a woman called the sheriff's office and claimed to be a bartender in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. She said one of her regular customers had got drunk at the bar one night and began crying, saying that he had killed some people in Osprey, Florida, when he was a young man, and mentioned the name Walker. She believed he did occasional work around town and was a gun enthusiast. The bartender never called again. In December 2012, it was announced that Smith and Hickok's bodies would be exhumed to match their DNA to semen samples taken from Christine back in 1959. The case wasn't a priority, and it would be August of 2013 before the results came in. They were inconclusive. Only partial DNA had been retrieved, and any conclusions were therefore uncertain. There is ample circumstantial evidence to suggest that the pair may have been responsible for the Walker family murders. They were in the area at the time and had already committed one atrocity. Both killings involved a home invasion, and both involved the occupants being executed with a firearm. Both had relatively minor items stolen. However, the Clutter family killing resulted from false information, with the home deliberately targeted in the belief it contained significant cash. That motive has to be discounted in the Walker family case. Equally, Smith prevented Hickok from carrying out a rape at the Clutter farm, whereas Christine was assaulted before her execution. A blonde hair was found in Christine's dress, and neither Smith nor Hickok were blonde. Smith and Hickok took cash at the first crime scene in two easy-to-carry and simple-to-pawn items and a radio and binoculars. At the second, killers took personal things related to Christine, namely her high school majorette uniform and marriage license. The taking of these items from the crime scene is suggestive that the killings were directly targeting Christine and the family rather than the tragic results of a home invasion. While police officially believe that Smith and Hickok remain the best suspects in the cold case, it's worth noting that the marriage license was eventually returned to the family when a relative included it in items that were given to Cliff Walker's niece. The Christmas tragedy that fell on Osprey in 1959 was unimaginable. Or it was unimaginable horror, I should say, and one that by all rights deserved justice. Sadly, it never came. Maybe the killer was a relative who bore some grudge against the Walkers, or simply wished to engage in his carnal fantasies. Perhaps the secret lover had been spurned, or maybe it was a home invasion. For a second time, ended in a slaughter. In any case, the family was wiped out in the most terrible circumstance. Their killings remain yet another dark and unsolved stain in Florida's long and inglorious criminal history. Let us know your thoughts on this case in the comment section below. Who do you think did it? Let us know your theories. And as always, if we got something wrong or missed something, leave it in the comments section below. As always, give us a thumbs up if you like our video, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a copy at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. Your support helps the channel grow, upgrade our equipment, bring in new hosts, be able to pay them, and one day take this show on the road. And as always, thank you so much for watching and listening. Thanks again for watching. And if you want to see more content from Cold Case Friday, check right here. And for other videos of true crime, check right here. And as always, we will see you next time. Take care. On Cold Case Friday, we dive into the tragic death of Princess Diana, a loss reverberated worldwide. Now, I still consider this a cold case because we truly don't know what really caused her death. Was it a murder or was it an accident? But in any regards, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Just search True Crime Never Sleeps. And with that, let's dive into today's episode. Princess Diana, known as the People's Princess, remains an indelible figure in the collective consciousness, embodying grace, compassion, and a profound humanitarian spirit. Her untimely death on August 31st, 1997, shocked the world, leaving millions to mourn the loss of a woman who had touched their hearts. we're going to dive into the circumstances surrounding Princess Diana's death and her enduring legacy. Diana, Princess of Wales, along with her companion Dodi Fayed and driver Henry Paul, met their tragic end in a car crash in the Pont de la Mort tunnel in Paris. Pursued by paparazzi, their Mercedes-Benz crashed into a pillar, leading to the instant demise of Fayed and Paul. Diana, critically injured, succumbed to her injuries. A few hours later, only bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones survived the crash, suffering severe injuries. The incident led to an international outcry against the intrusive and relentless nature of the paparazzi, who were initially blamed for causing the crash. The subsequent investigation determined that driver Henry Paul was under the influence of alcohol and prescription drugs, contributing to the accident. Nonetheless, the role of pursuing photographers and the media culture surrounding celebrities came under heavy scrutiny. Born Diana Spencer on July 1st, 1961, she became an international icon after her marriage to Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales. Despite the challenges in her personal life, including a highly publicized separation and eventual divorce, Diana remained committed to her philanthropic endeavors. She became a beacon of hope and solace to the marginalized, underserved, championing causes such as HIV/AIDS awareness, landmine eradication, and mental health. Her sincerity and genuine compassion endeared her to people worldwide, transcending cultural, social, and geographical boundaries. The news of Princess Diana's death was met with disbelief and sorrow, with people across the globe mourning her loss. Millions converged around Buckingham Palace and Diana's residence at Kensington Palace, leaving flowers, notes, and tokens of love. Her funeral on September 6, 1997, drew an estimated 2.5 billion viewers worldwide, making it one of the most watched events in television history. A somber procession through London concluded at Westminster Abbey, where Elton John performed a reworked version of Candle in the Wind, paying tribute to the beloved princess. The grieving nation and the royal family were at odds, reflecting the strained relationship between the monarchy and the public. The royal family's perceived lack of responsiveness ignited criticism, leading to Queen Elizabeth II addressing the nation to pay tribute to Diana, acknowledge the public's grief. And here is where we dive into some of the conspiracy theories behind the murder of Princess Diana. The investigations into Princess Diana's death have been marred by controversy and speculation. French judicial investigations concluded in 1999 that the crash resulted primarily from Paul's intoxication and excessive speed. However, speculation about the role of the paparazzi and alleged conspiracies involving intelligence agencies and the royal family proliferated. Mohammed Al-Fayed, Dodi's father, was particularly vociferous in claiming that the crash was not an accident, but a conspiracy to murder Diana and his son. However, Operation Paget, a British inquiry led by Lord Stevens, concluded in 2006 that there was no credible evidence to support such claims, reaffirming the initial findings of the French investigation. Despite the exhaustive investigations, conspiracy theories persist, reflecting the enduring fascination and unresolved questions surrounding Diana's death. The cloud of mystery and the battle over narratives have kept the tragic event in public discourse, fueling debates and discussions. Beyond the controversy and the tragedy, Diana's enduring legacy lies in her humanitarian work and her approach to royalty. She redefined the role of a royal, embracing accessibility, empathy, and informality, breaking away from the stiff upper lip traditionally associated with the monarchy. Princess Diana's approach to humanitarian causes was groundbreaking. Her handshake with an AIDS patient in 1987 challenged the stigmatization and misinformation surrounding the disease. Her walk through an active minefield in Angola in 1997 brought global attention to the devastating impact of landmines. The Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund, established after her death, continues her philanthropic legacy, supporting initiatives aligned with her passions and concerns. Diana's influence is also palpable in the charitable work of her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, who've championed mental health, veterans' welfare, conservation, and other causes. Princess Diana's death remains a pivotal moment in history, marking the loss of a global icon who personified compassion, humanity, and relentless desire to make a difference. Her impact transcends her untimely demise, inspiring countless individuals and organizations to uphold her values and continue her mission of kindness, acceptance, and love. The tragic circumstances of her death have left indelible scars and invaluable lessons about media ethics, personal boundaries, and the consequences of unrelenting public scrutiny. Diana's life and death serve as enduring reminders of the profound impact one person can have on the world, and the enduring power of empathy, kindness, and commitment to making the world a better place. While the pain of losing Princess Diana still resonates with many, it is her life, her work, her compassion, and her enduring influence that define her enduring legacy. People's Princess continues to live in the hearts of millions, inspiring new generations to embody the principles she championed and to continue her work, fostering a more inclusive, compassionate, and humane world. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Do you think Princess Diana's death was just an accident, or was there a conspiracy behind it? Let us know in the comments. Give us a thumbs up if you like our video. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell notification button to be notified of future videos. And of course, if you want to support the channel, go ahead, go to buymeacoffee.com/ECNS. Your support helps the channel grow, upgrade our equipment, bring new hosts, be able to pay them, and hopefully we really want to take this show on the road and record from live crime scenes, whether it's California, New York, East Coast somewhere, Texas. Your support can help make that happen. Of course, as always, thank you so much for your time and support. I'll see you next time. Welcome to the True Crime Never Sleeps podcast. I'm your host, Larry Least. On today's episode of Cold Case Friday, we dive into the case of Suzanne Murphy. Before we do that, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Audible, for sponsoring this episode. If you're a fan of audiobooks of any kind of genre, Audible is your place to go. Head on over to audibletrial.com/Larry21 and you can get a free audiobook and free 30-day trial for no money down. And without further ado, let's dive right into today's story. On May 10th, 2020, a Colorado woman, mother of two, went out for a bike ride on Mother's Day and never returned. 49-year-old Suzanne Murphy was reported missing several hours later by a neighbor. An immediate search around her Chaffee County home started. Authorities used scent tracking dogs and drones to cover all areas. After a year of turning every stone on the bike trail and the case, authorities believe they're not dealing with a disappearance anymore, but a homicide. The killer? They believe the husband did it. So what happened to Suzanne Murphy, and why is her husband charged with her suspected murder? Just days after her 49th birthday, Suzanne went missing on Mother's Day 2020 from the $1.7 million Colorado mansion she shared with her husband Barry and their two adult daughters Mallory and Macy. Suzanne was alone that Sunday. Her husband was allegedly 140 miles away in Denver to set up a landscaping job, while her daughters were planning to return from a camping trip to Idaho and spend the day with their mother. It was customary for Suzanne to go on bike rides, but when their daughters couldn't get a hold of her for hours, they asked their neighbor to check up on her. Suzanne was nowhere to be seen, and at around 5:46 p.m. that day, a neighbor filed a missing persons report in the Chaffee County Communications Center. The woman had presumably disappeared in the area on County Road 225 and West Highway 50. Authorities quickly organized a search using drones and dogs, trying to find traces of what might have happened to Suzanne. Barry was notified that his wife was missing, and he came back from Denver in the evening. At first, he was adamant that Suzanne must have been attacked by a wild animal, even though the search dogs never picked up her scent in the woods. The first search came up empty, but the following day, the police were back at the scene looking for clues. And surprisingly, they found a major one. Investigators found Suzanne's bike at the end of a nearby hill, the same spot they had already covered in the previous search. They suspected the bike could have been planted there. There was little damage to the bike, and police never shared whether they found any clues on it or not. 2 days after Suzanne went missing, the store manager in the area said that Barry Morphew had knocked on the window and given her a note. Quote, a baby blue bike helmet and biker's clothing. That was his wife's description, he said. and asked the manager to look out for her. The Poncha Marker store manager was baffled that his quickly scribbled note didn't include any physical description whatsoever, like hair color, height, eye color. By May 14th, Barry's theory of his wife's disappearance had changed from wild animal attack to abduction. He even posted a $100,000 reward to the alleged kidnappers, and a family friend later added another $100,000. A few days later, Barry shared a heartfelt video on Facebook, begging Suzanne's keepers to bring her back, saying, quote, "No questions asked." He would do anything to get her back. The video came shortly after police announced that they had discovered an item belonging to Suzanne close to her home. On the same day Barry posted the Facebook video, authorities expanded the investigation and started searching water sites in hopes of finding more clues. They asked residents to keep any video footage they might have between May 8th and May 12th. 9 days after Suzanne went missing, authorities searched the Morphews home for the first time. Their findings weren't disclosed to the public, but pictures from the scene showed evidence bags were taken from the house. On May 22nd, police organized a search on a nearby riverfront property where Barry had previously completed a landscaping job. The Salida property was 12 miles away from the family home, and authorities dug up a freshly made concrete slab on the site. They didn't find anything underneath and ended the search 2 days later. It seemed like authorities had hit a dead end on the case, and it remained quiet for weeks. In the meantime, neighbors started calling the station, offering more clues about Suzanne and Barry's relationship and her disappearance. That prompted police to search their home again on July 9th. After weeks of speculation and no new leads shared to the public, Barry spoke out. He continued to believe that his wife was either attacked by an animal or had a run-in with someone she knew. By the end of August, however, Suzanne's brother Andrew had already started organizing an independent search of his own. He was gathering volunteers and even started a GoFundMe page to cover the costs of the search. Andrew reportedly believed Barry might have something to do with his sister's disappearance. When police started looking more into Barry, they spoke with his employees to get a sense of the type of person and boss he was. 2 of his employees claimed to have been inside the hotel room Barry used in Denver on the day of Suzanne was reported missing. They remembered it smelled strongly of bleach when they entered. There were wet towels everywhere, they said, and it seemed like he hadn't slept in his bed. Andrew's independent search started on September 24th and included hundreds of volunteers. Just days after it had begun, searchers found a clue they reported to the FBI. The cadaver dogs had picked up a scent on a plot of land owned by the family. A special team was sent on site to search the property, and that's when police stopped sharing their progress on the case, until months later when they arrested Barry. All these months of radio silence from authorities made many believe that the case had gone cold, while in fact, police were using this time to analyze evidence, gather witness reports, and build a case against Suzanne's husband. At some point, their disappearance case turned into a possible homicide. Earlier in May 2021, a year after Suzanne disappeared, authorities arrested Barry. He was charged with first-degree murder, attempting to influence a public servant connected to his wife's case, and tampering with physical evidence. Before his arrest, Barry had put the family's Colorado mansion up for sale. He said his daughters were scared to live in a place where their mother could have been abducted. The home was sold just days before he was arrested. The district attorney said that she is confident Suzanne was murdered, even though authorities haven't been able to find her body. Although Barry had a solid alibi for Mother's Day when he was in Denver, police believe he may have killed Suzanne the day before, on May 9th. Authorities also questioned his need to go to Denver in the first place, since Barry was a volunteer firefighter. Initially said he went to Denver for firefighting training. Turned out, however, there was no training planned for Sunday. All training sessions were postponed due to COVID. That made investigators question the purpose of Barry's trip. That and the reports of his hotel room smelling like bleach. And they began building a different case. Barry and Suzanne tied the knot in 1994, and to many, they were the perfect couple. They were happy and had 2 amazing daughters. Suzanne was a cancer survivor, having overcome Hodgkin's lymphoma twice. The first time was before her daughters were born. The second time was in 2018, right after the family moved to Colorado. At the time of her disappearance, Suzanne had just finished her last cancer treatment and was starting her life anew. During the investigation, it was hinted that Suzanne and Barry may have hit a rough patch in their relationship. Barry allegedly had a darker side to him and wasn't the greatest boss to have. Whether that's grounded in fact or speculation, only those involved can know. And that is all we know for this case. Let us know your thoughts on this case in the comments section below. What do you think happened? Do you think the husband was responsible? Let us know. And of course, you can find us on Good Pods, Spotify, iTunes, anywhere you get your podcast from. Of course, give us a thumbs up if you like our videos, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell notification button to be notified of future videos. And if you like our content, consider supporting the channel. Buy us a coffee by going to buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We will see you next time.
We hope you enjoy the videos we are providing you this year. And as always, please consider supporting the channel so we can keep this content growing. You can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. And as always, give us a thumbs up, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell notification button to be notified of future videos. If you can't afford to give, we understand during this holiday season. Consider just leaving us a review or a comment or a like, or send us a tweet and let us know where you're watching from.
So without further ado, let's dive right into today's episode. We will uncover the story of Walter Collins, a 9-year-old boy whose disappearance set off a series of events that exposed not just a grieving mother's quest for truth, but the depth of corruption within one of America's largest cities. This is a tale filled with suspense, heartbreak, and a desire for justice that would not be silenced. But before we dive into the heart of this matter, let's set the stage. The 1920s, often referred to as the Roaring Twenties, was a decade marked by post-war prosperity, cultural dynamism, and significant societal changes. The American dream was becoming a reality for many as they moved into rapidly growing cities, hoping for better lives. Los Angeles, with its blossoming film industry, was one such city. The population was exploding with people drawn to the glamour of Hollywood and the promise of good jobs and good weather. But beneath the glittering surface of the city's success lurked a darker underbelly of crime and corruption. The Los Angeles Police Department of the time was a prime example of this corruption. Bribery, cover-ups, and an evident disregard for the city's growing crime rate tarnished the department's reputation. Public trust was dwindling, and it was amidst this tumultuous climate that the case of Walter Collins came to the forefront. If this story sounds familiar to you, it might be because it served as the inspiration for the 2008 movie Changeling, directed by Clint Eastwood and starring Angelina Jolie as Walter's mother, Christine Collins. While the film did an exceptional job shedding light on this story, it only provided a glimpse into the complexity of the case and the era. But today we'll dive deeper. We'll explore the societal and cultural nuances that were at play, how this affected the handling of Walter's case, and the implications that had on the people involved and the city at large. This is more than just a story of a missing child. It's a tale of a city on the brink of change, a police department mired in scandal, and a mother's relentless pursuit for the truth. So buckle up, listeners, as we journey back in time, into the heart of Los Angeles and unravel the mystery of the disappearance of Walter Collins. On March 10, 1928, Christine Collins, a dedicated telephone operator at the Southern California Telephone Company, sent her young son Walter to see a movie. This was a common occurrence, a way for a hard-working single mother to keep her son entertained while she was at work. But this seemingly ordinary day took a harrowing turn. When Christine returned home that evening, the house was eerily quiet. Walter was nowhere to be found. Picture this, a mother tired from a long day of work, coming home to an empty house. The panic that must have set in as she searched each room, called out to her neighbors, and ultimately realized that her son had vanished without a trace. The next hours and days were a blur for Christine as she reached out to the Los Angeles Police Department, desperately pleading for their help in finding Walter. Now let's remember the state of LAPD during this time. They were under the spotlight for corruption and inefficiency, and public sentiment was growing increasingly negative. The case of Walter Collins provided them with an opportunity, a chance to redeem themselves in the public eye, to show that they were capable of serving and protecting their wonderful city. Yet, as we soon discover, their desperate desire to solve this case quickly and regained public trust led to a series of missteps and questionable decisions. The police launched a nationwide search for Walter, investing substantial resources into locating the boy. The case was widely publicized, and it seemed everyone in America was on the lookout for Walter Collins. But as weeks turned into months with no sign of Walter, hope started to dwindle, until 5 months after Walter's disappearance, a boy matching his description was found in Illinois. The LAPD, eager for a resolution, announced they had found Walter. Christine Collins was overwhelmed with relief, her prayers seemingly answered. That is, until she met the boy who stepped off the train. Christine looked into the boy's eyes, and a chill must have run down her spine, because, listeners, she was certain of one thing. This boy was not her son. So here we are at the train station. Christine Collins staring at the boy who was not her son. In her heart, she knew the truth. The police, the public, they wanted closure, a happy ending. Faced with Christine's steadfast denial that this boy was Walter, the LAPD went on the defensive. Rather than reopening the case or considering the possibility that they might be wrong, they took a darker path. They declared Christine Collins delusional and hysterical. They painted a picture of a distressed, unstable woman who, after months of worry and fear, could not recognize her own child. After all, this boy claimed he was Walter. He knew details about Walter's life, about his home, and the police were certain they had solved the case. The problem, as far as they saw it, was Christine. And so, in a shocking move, the LAPD committed Christine to the LA County General Hospital's psychopathic ward under a Code 12 internment, a code that police used when they wanted to silence someone, or also when they wanted to discredit them. While Christine fought to maintain her sanity amidst the chaos of the psychiatric ward, the boy who claimed to be Walter lived in her home, attended school, and continued to insist he was Walter Collins. But as days turned into weeks, cracks began to show, until finally, confronted with the inconsistencies in his story, the boy confessed. He was not Walter Collins, but Arthur Hutchins Jr., a runaway from Illinois. He had lied about his identity to come to LA for a chance at Hollywood. Arthur's confession sent shockwaves through the city. Christine was released from the psychiatric ward, her sanity officially and publicly restored. But with her freedom came a harsh reality. Walter was missing, and her fight was far from over. After she was released, public outrage against the LAPD reached a fever pitch. The department, once seen as the city's guardian, was now under a microscope, its reputation severely damaged. Meanwhile, the whereabouts of Walter Collins remained a mystery. That is, until the name Gordon Stewart Northcott surfaced. Northcott was the man behind the infamous Wineville chicken coop murders. The story unfolded when Northcott's nephew, Sanford Clark, was found and told a terrifying tale. He spoke of multiple boys being held captive, tortured, and murdered at Northcott's chicken ranch in Wineville, a rural town not far from Los Angeles. In his chilling account, Sanford mentioned Walter. According to him, Walter had been held at the ranch too. The LAPD, desperate for answers, questioned Northcott. He was an enigmatic figure, seeming to relish the attention and the mind games. His accounts regarding Walter were inconsistent. At times he admitted to killing the boy, at other times he recanted. In the end, Northcott was convicted for the murders of 3 boys and was sentenced to death. But the question remained, had he killed Walter? The evidence was circumstantial. Sanford's testimony was the only link, and Northcott's own statements were unreliable at best. Christine Collins, however, clung to hope. Even with the mounting evidence against Northcott, she refused to believe her son was dead. In her heart, she believed Walter was still out there somewhere. Years passed. The LAPD faced reforms. The city of Wineville, unable to shake the stigma associated with the gruesome murders, changed its name to Mira Loma. But Walter never came home. His disappearance remains one of the most haunting, unsolved cases in Los Angeles history. It's a story that prompts us to question our institutions, to challenge our actions, and to fight for truth, even when the world seems to be against us. It's a story of mothers' unyielding love, a city's thirst for justice, and a mystery that nearly a century later still captures our imagination. Walter Collins, the boy who vanished without a trace, his story will always remind us that every missing person is more than just a case number. They are sons, daughters, loved ones, and their stories deserve to be told. Let us know your thoughts on this case in the comment section below. Let us know your theories. What do you think happened? Do you think the person held responsible was the guilty party? Let us know. And of course, give us a thumbs up if you like our video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell notification button to be notified of future videos. As always, if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. Your support helps the channel grow, upgrade our equipment, bring in new hosts, be able to pay them, and create even more content, and most of all, hopefully be able to take this show on the road. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We will see you next time. Whoa, 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 whoa. Can't believe you were about to just not like this video. Come on, give us a thumbs up if you watched it this far. Or subscribe. The choice is yours. Welcome to the True Crime Never Sleeps podcast. I am your host, Larry Leese. Today we're exploring the story of Tara Calico, a young woman whose tragic disappearance and murder remains a mystery for over 30 years. This case has garnered national attention with countless investigators, journalists, and true crime enthusiasts attempting to piece together the clues that might bring Tara's killer to justice. In this episode, we're examining the facts surrounding her life, disappearance, and death. We'll break down some leads and theories, as well as the challenges faced by law enforcement officials throughout the investigation. Additionally, we'll explore the impact that Tara's case has had on her family, the local community, and society as a whole. Tara's case is an important reminder that many individuals whose lives have been cut short by senseless acts of violence, and the families and communities left to grieve without answers. Join us as we honor Tara's memory by seeking the truth about her untimely death. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Tara Calico was born on February 28, 1969 in Belen, New Mexico. She was the oldest of 3 children, born to John and Patty, and grew up in a loving household alongside her siblings, Chris and Michelle. Her parents were divorced, but she remained close to both of them and frequently visited her father in Florida. Tara was a bright and active young woman who excelled academically and enjoyed a variety of hobbies and interests. She was an avid reader, a talented artist, and a dedicated athlete who ran track and played tennis. In her free time, she liked to listen to music, watch movies, and spend time with her family and friends. On September 20th, 1988, Tara disappeared while on a morning bike ride near her home in Belen. She had planned to meet her mother, Patty, at a nearby country store after her ride, but never arrived. A search was immediately launched with volunteers and law enforcement combing the area for any signs of the missing young woman. Her bike was eventually discovered alongside a busy highway with no signs of Tara. The disappearance of Tara Calico quickly gained national attention, with media outlets reporting on the case and the search for the missing young woman. Despite extensive efforts to locate her, including searches of the surrounding desert and appeals to the public for information, she remained missing for over a year. It wasn't until June of 1989 that a breakthrough was made in the case, when 2 women discovered a Polaroid photo in a convenience store parking lot in Port St. Joe, Florida. The photo showed 2 bound and gagged individuals, with one of them resembling Tara Calico. The other individual has never been identified. The discovery of the photo sparked renewed interest in the case and led to a series of investigations and theories about what happened to Tara Calico. Her disappearance on September 20th, 1988 was a shock to the community, and the subsequent investigation was one of the most intensive, in New Mexico's history. The timeline of events leading up to Tara's disappearance begins on the morning of September 20th, when she left her mother's house for a bike ride, planning to meet at a nearby convenience store. She was riding her mother's pink Huffy mountain bike and wearing a Walkman headphones and black shorts. When she failed to show up, her mother immediately reported her missing, and a massive search was launched. The search lasted for weeks and involved hundreds of volunteers and law enforcement officers, as well as helicopters and search dogs. Despite extensive efforts, no trace of Tara was found, and the case remained unsolved for over a year. During this time, her family never gave up hope of finding her and held vigils and fundraisers to support the search. In 1989, a hiker found a bundle of clothing in a desert area near Elephant Butte Lake, about 20 miles north of where Tara had disappeared. The clothes, which included a white shirt, a pair of men's underwear, and black sweatpants, were identified as belonging to Tara. This discovery renewed the investigation into her disappearance, and investigators focused on the clothing as potential evidence. Months later, a local man discovered Tara's bike lying next to Highway 47, about a mile and a half from where she was last seen. The bike appeared to have been hit by a car with a tire bent and the rear wheel locked up. Investigators believe that the bike had been placed at the scene to suggest that Tara had been hit by a car, but they could not find any evidence to support this theory. Despite the discovery of her belongings, there was still no sign of Tara. Her family continued to hold out hope for her safe return. But as time passed, they began to fear the worst. In the years following her disappearance, there have been a number of possible sightings and leads that have been investigated by law enforcement and private investigators. While none of these leads have definitely solved the case, they have provided possible clues and insights into what might have happened to Tara. One of the most intriguing leads in the case is the Polaroid photograph discovered in Florida in 1989. The photo shows a young woman and a young boy bound and gagged, and bears a striking resemblance to Tara Calico. The other individual, like we said, has still never been identified, and the circumstances surrounding the photo's discovery still remains a mystery. Despite extensive analysis of the photo and numerous leads that have been investigated as a result, the identities of the individuals in the photo and the location of the photo's taking remain unknown. There have also been numerous possible sightings of Tara reported over the years, both within the U.S. and globally. Some witnesses claim to have seen a young woman resembling Tara in the company of a man or a group of men, while others report seeing a woman who resembles Tara living under an assumed name. Many of these sightings have been investigated, but none have led to a definitive resolution of the case. In addition to possible sightings, investigators have explored numerous theories about what may have happened to Tara. Some theories suggest that she was abducted by a group of individuals for an unknown reason, while others suggest that she may have been the victim of a crime of opportunity. Still, others propose that Tara's disappearance may have been related to her father's involvement in a high-profile legal case at the time. Despite the many theories that have been proposed, none have been confirmed, and the case remains unsolved. Overall, the possible sightings and leads in the case underscore the many challenges faced by investigators in unsolved cases. While these leads can provide valuable insight and clues, they also can create confusion and uncertainty, and ultimately may not lead to the resolution of the case. Despite the challenges, however, Tara's family and supporters are committed to seeking justice for her and bringing your killer to justice. The investigation into Tara Calico's disappearance was one of the most extensive in New Mexico's history. Like we said, involving hundreds of law enforcement, volunteers, and private investigators. And despite this, in their best efforts, the case remains unsolved for years, with few leads and not much evidence to really guide investigators. The case presented numerous challenges, including the lack of a clear motive for the crime, the large number of potential suspects and witnesses, and the difficulty of searching the vast desert landscape where Tara was last seen. Over the years, various law enforcement agencies have been involved in the investigation of Tara's case, including the New Mexico State Police, the FBI, and local sheriff's offices. These agencies have worked together to share information, coordinate searches, pursue leads, but ultimately the case is still unsolved. Despite numerous tips and potential suspects, no one has ever been charged with Tara's murder, and her family has never received closure. In recent years, new developments have emerged in the Tara Calico case, including advances in DNA technology and the discovery of new evidence. In 2013, a man named Michael Henley came forward claiming to have information about Tara's murder. According to Henley, he had witnessed her abduction by two men and had later seen her body buried in the desert. Despite this information, however, Henley's credibility has been called into question, and no new evidence has been found to support his claims. Additionally, in 2018, the Valencia County Sheriff's Office announced they had discovered a new piece of evidence related to Tara's case. The evidence was not revealed to the public, but authorities stated that it had been sent to a forensic laboratory for analysis. It remains unclear what, and if any, impact this new evidence will have on the investigation. Overall, the investigation and legal proceedings in the Tara Calico case highlight the many challenges and complexities of solving a cold case. Despite the dedication and tireless efforts of law enforcement officials, Tara's murder remains unsolved. Her family continues day and night to search for answers and justice. The case serves as a reminder of the many victims of unsolved crimes and the ongoing need for resources and support for families and communities affected by these tragedies. The Calico case has had a profound impact on the community and society as a whole. It has brought attention to the issues of unsolved crimes and the toll that it can take on victims, families, and communities. Additionally, the case has served as a reminder of the importance of seeking justice for victims and holding perpetrators accountable for their actions. The role of media and public awareness has been critical to the impact of the Tara Calico case. Through national and international coverage of the case, the public has been made aware of the ongoing search for Tara and the efforts to solve the case. The awareness has led to an outpouring of support for the family and a renewed focus on the issue of unsolved crimes. The case has also been featured in a number of true crime books and podcasts, bringing even greater attention to the case and the issue of unsolved crimes. The legacy of Tara Calico is one of resilience and perseverance in the face of tragedy. Despite the many challenges faced by her family and the investigators working on the case, they have never given up hope of finding answers and bringing our killer to justice. Her story has inspired many to speak out on behalf of victims of unsolved crimes and to push for greater resources and support for those affected by these tragedies. And that is our case for this Cold Case Friday. Let us know your thoughts on this case. What do you think happened? Let us know in the comment section below. And as always, give us a thumbs up if you like our video, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell notification button to be notified of future videos. And as always, you can support the channel by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. Your support helps the channel grow, upgrade our equipment, bring in new hosts, be able to pay them, and create even more content, and hopefully take this show on the road. And we can make that dream a reality with your support. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.
Welcome to the True Crime Never Sleeps podcast. I'm your host, Larry Lace. On today's episode of Cold Case Friday, we dive into the case of Amy Sue Pagnick. Police initially thought the teenager ran away from home, but now believe she was abducted. But before we get into the story, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Audible, for sponsoring this episode. Audible is home to over thousands of audiobooks from any kind of genre. Fiction, nonfiction, historical, autobiographies. The choices are endless. If you're interested in a free audiobook of your choice, head on over to audibletrial.com/Larry21. And now on to today's episode. Amy Sue Pagnick spent the day helping her father harvest fruit and vegetables from a farm they owned in Ysanti County, Minnesota, on August 5th, 1989. Normally, Amy's mother and younger sister would have come along to help with the harvest, but they had other plans on this particular day. Amy and her father, Marshall Midden, arrived at the farm around noon and spent about 5 hours there, leaving for their Maple Grove, Minnesota home at 5 p.m. They were only 2 miles from home when Marshall decided to stop at the Holiday gas station in Osseo to use the restroom, while Amy waited in his car. When he returned a few minutes later, the 13-year-old was gone. Assuming she had needed to use the ladies' room, Marshall waited outside the door for her. There was a customer in the single-person ladies' room, but it was an older woman. Amy was nowhere to be found. Marshall spent about 10 minutes searching the area surrounding the gas station, but no one recalled seeing Amy get out of the car. Confused, Marshall then called his wife from a payphone outside the gas station and told her that he couldn't find Amy. He thought perhaps she had gotten tired of waiting for him and decided to walk home. Susan hadn't seen her, and it was unlikely Amy could have walked all the way to her house in that short of amount of time. Marshall drove home slowly, hoping to spot his daughter along the route. When he got to the house, there was still no sign of Amy. He and Susan called the police. Maple Grove police officer Jeff Garland was dispatched at her home to take a missing persons report. He arrived at 5:45 p.m. It wasn't the first time he had responded to a call from Amy's parents. He had already been there several times that summer. According to Jeff, Amy was a frequent runaway, and her parents had been frustrated by her behavior. Marshall and Susan previously told the officer that Amy was out of control. and they suspected that she would run off to drink alcohol and have sex. The couple told Garland that Amy had a medical condition that caused pressure on her brain and she was prone to having seizures. They also noted that she might be bipolar, though she had never been diagnosed as such and was not taking any medication. Susan worried that Amy might have had a seizure while she was waiting for her father. Amy would frequently become disoriented after having a seizure. This could have resulted in her wandering away from her father's car. Given the short amount of time that Amy was out of Marshall's sight, police didn't really think that the seizure was responsible for Amy's disappearance. Amy had already run away from home and been reported missing 3 times that summer. Each time she returned on her own. Police believed that Amy had simply run off again. She was categorized as a juvenile runaway and no investigation into her disappearance took place. As weeks went by without any sign of Amy, law enforcement seemed to reevaluate their initial runaway assumption. In 1990, they conducted interviews of people who had known Amy and searched her home, but the teenager's location remained a mystery. A group called Missing Children Minnesota learned of Amy's case and helped to spread the word about her disappearance. Although a few potential sightings of Amy were reported, police were unable to verify any of them. The investigation into Amy's disappearance went cold almost immediately, and it would stay that way for decades. Her case had failed to grab the attention of local news media, and it appeared that Susan and Marshall were the only ones still looking for Amy. Behind the scenes, however, police continued to quietly work her case. In May 2014, as the 25th anniversary of her disappearance drew near, actions taken by the police department would propel Amy's case into the headlines for the first time. Although they remained tight-lipped about the investigation in May 2014, police obtained a search warrant for Marshall and Susan's home. The couple was forced to relocate for a week while law enforcement swarmed the property. They immediately started excavating the home's backyard. Amy's parents said they would have given police permission to do whatever they wanted to do to the property without a warrant, but admitted that they didn't think it made any sense. Officials declined to say if they considered Amy's parents to be suspects. Susan maintained that they had done nothing wrong and were pleased to see that police were finally taking Amy's case seriously, though she was confused as to why they were focusing on their property. The fact that police executed a search warrant caught the attention of the news media, and Amy's case received extensive publicity for the first time. Reporters began probing into the details of Amy's disappearance, and they had a number of questions for police. Although officials refused to go into detail, they noted that there were no witnesses who saw Amy at the Holiday gas station on the day she went missing. Detectives were unable to verify that the teenager had been there at all, and asked for anyone with information about the case to come forward and speak with police. Neighbors appeared shocked at the fact that police were tearing up the family's backyard. Many believed she had been abducted by a stranger. Some thought police were focusing on the family simply because they had no other suspects, due to their failure to adequately investigate the case when Amy first went missing. Investigators spent a full week searching the property for clues about Amy's whereabouts. If they found anything, they didn't release this information publicly, and no arrests were made. Susan noted that officials appeared to have taken some paperwork from the home. It's unclear how this might be related to Amy's disappearance. The following month, police spent 4 days conducting a search of the family's farm, combing over the 140-acre property. Again, they did not release any information about what had prompted the search or what they were hoping to find. Officials maintained that they had no suspects in Amy's disappearance, and the search was just part of their ongoing efforts. Susan and Marshall later admitted to reporters that they believed they had been prime suspects for years, but they maintained their innocence. Susan believed that Amy had likely been abducted for sex trafficking purposes. Although the police had no direct evidence of this, rumors had circulated years earlier about Amy possibly being sighted working as a stripper or a prostitute. Amy's case soon faded back out of the headlines, and she remains missing. Detectives admit that they don't know if Amy is alive or dead. As of now, they have no evidence that a crime was committed. They remain hopeful that Amy is still alive. Amy's disappearance has been the subject of much speculation by amateur sleuths. Some believe that Amy got out of her father's car, perhaps after having a seizure, and was abducted by a stranger. They are critical of police for their lax attitude when Amy was first reported missing, and even officials agreed that the initial response was poor. If they had taken the case seriously, they might have been able to find witnesses who saw Amy at the gas station that day. At the time, they didn't even check to see if there had been surveillance cameras there. It was an oversight that potentially hindered their investigation. Others seem to believe that Amy's parents were involved. Many question why Marshall would bother stopping at a restroom just 2 miles from his home. They point out that the police had been called to the home on numerous occasions, suggesting there was tension between Amy and her parents that might have ended in violence. It's also possible that Amy decided to run away from home, then ran into foul play at some point after that. Her friends pointed out that she had experienced some bullying at school and often spoke of wanting to run away. It's unlikely that a 13-year-old could survive long on her own, but there is always a chance that Amy is out there somewhere, alive and happy. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Do you have any theories on what happened? And as always, give us a like. If you like our videos, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell notification button to be notified of future videos. And if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We will see you next time. Take care.
Welcome to the True Crime Never Sleeps podcast. I'm your host, Larry Lace. And on today's episode of Cold Case Fridays, we dive into the unsolved murders of sisters Barbara and Patricia Grimes, also known as the Love Me Tender murders. But before you do that, we'd like to remind you, come join us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Just search True Crime Never Sleeps, and let's keep the conversation going. Without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. 6 decades ago, the Grimes sisters, Barbara 15 and Patricia 12, blissfully left home to watch heartthrob Elvis Presley and Love Me Tender at the Brighton Theater in Chicago. The tearjerker ended with Elvis's death in a shootout. The crowd filed out, and the Grimes girls vanished. Only 5 excruciating days tickled by. If somebody is holding them, please let the girls call me, their mother, Loretta Grimes, pleaded in a January 11th, 1957 article. On January 22nd, 1957, their naked bodies were found in a field in a nearby suburb with no signs of fatal violence. The discovery horrified Chicagoans in the working-class Catholic neighborhood where the girls lived. With the public demanding answers, law enforcement went into overdrive, interviewing multiple suspects and filing charges only to drop them for lack of proof as authorities feuded openly. Now the notorious mystery is a footnote in the city's history. Even so, the case is still an open murder investigation. Like many 1950s Bobby Soxers, Barbara and Patricia adored Elvis Presley. They'd seen Love Me Tender dozens of times, but begged their mother to let them catch the evening show at the local theater. Just a short bus ride away was the Christmas holidays. December 28th, 1956, and Loretta gave her permission. Barbara, a high school sophomore with a dazzling smile, was known as the serious one, and Patricia was a high-spirited 7th grader. The two sisters were also close friends. When the pair failed to return by midnight, Loretta Grimes called the police. As officers scoured the city, tips poured in. Workers at a Chicago five-and-dime store were positive they saw Barbara and Patricia with 2 sailors listening to Elvis records on January 3rd, 1957. A Minnesota woman who was traveling swore she met the sisters in a Nashville bus station restroom on January 9th, 1957. That account made headlines, spurring rumors the girls were headed to Memphis, Elvis Presley's home. The singer himself issued a statement saying, "If you are good Presley fans, you'll go home and ease your mother's worries." But Loretta Grimes and her ex-husband Joseph insisted their daughters were in danger. They are not the type of girls to run away, Loretta Grimes is quoted as saying. Chicagoan Dominic Pasiga, emeritus professor of history at Columbia College, was 7 when the sisters disappeared, saying, quote, "It was on everybody's minds." There were signs in the windows of the store saying, "Don't talk to strangers." On January 22nd, 1957, passing motorists saw what looked like a mannequin off the bridge over Devil's Creek near Willow Springs, a southwest suburb. Authorities converged and found the girls' bodies sprawled on the frozen ground. "I tried to tell police my daughters didn't run away, but they didn't listen to me," said Joseph Grimes. Patricia had several minor puncture wounds in her chest, possibly made by an ice pick, and Barbara's face had marks and bruises. Harry Goss, the chief investigator for Cook County Coroner Walter McCarran, preliminary autopsy, however, indicated the girls died of exposure to freezing temperatures. The anticlimactic resolution with no evidence of traumatic violence amplified the mystery and renewed pressure on investigators. Again, the public chimed in with tips. This included a cabbie's description of seeing the sisters December 30th, 1956, at a Skid Row diner located on Chicago's hardscrabble Madison Street with two men, one reportedly with sideburns, like Elvis. Police pursuing the diner lead tracked down a young drifter named Edward Bedwell from Tennessee. Bedwell, 21, was a former circus worker who had briefly served in the U.S. Air Force. He had jobs at a factory and as a dishwasher when detectives picked him up for questioning. After several days in custody, Bedwell signed a confession on January 27, 1957, admitting he killed Barbara and Patricia with an accomplice named Frank. As he told it, he and Frank met the girls at a Madison Street tavern on January 7th. They spent a week together, shacking up at various hotels. But on January 13th, after the girls resisted the men's advances, Bedwell and Frank knocked them unconscious, then dumped the sisters in a ditch. If I hadn't been drinking, I wouldn't have done what I'd done, and what I'd done, I didn't do intentionally. Loretta Grimes vehemently denied her daughters would arouse with disreputable men, saying, quote, "Our girls came from a good home and were brought up in religious surroundings." Almost immediately, holes started appearing in Bedwell's story. Medical experts concluded the girls died on December 28th. Bedwell's factory time card provided an alibi for the night they disappeared. His defense attorney insisted Bedwell's confession was coerced. Bedwell was released from jail on bond on February 5th, 1957, to the chagrin of Cook County Sheriff Joseph Loman Glos, who believed he was responsible. On February 14th, 1957, Glos took matters into his own hands. The larger-than-life fedora-wearing tough son of a gun called a press conference at his family home. He insisted the girls could not have died on December 28th and revealed lab results indicating Barbara had been sexually molested. He knew and believed the girls were both raped. Harry Glos contended McCarran covered up evidence in deference to Loretta and to keep the sisters' reputations intact. The coroner held his own press conference the next day and fired Glos, who continued to investigate the case. After the Bedwell debacle, several suspects emerged, but nothing stuck. One was Charles Melquist, a suburbanite found guilty in 1959 of murdering another girl, Bonnie Leigh Scott. Her nude body was found November 1958 in a wooded area a few miles from where the Grimes sisters died. Authorities questioned Melquist about Barbara and Patricia after police found a list of girls, including young women from the Grimes neighborhood, at his apartment, but that was the extent of their inquiry. Ray Johnson, a former police officer and lecturer who writes the Chicago History Cop blog, thinks Melquist played a role in the crime, but was protected because of ties to the Chicago mob. Saying, quote, "Somebody still doesn't want this case to be solved. I know there's at least 3 people alive that know what happened that night." Another theory is that the sisters died after the liaison with teenage boys from a local gang who took them for a ride and then abandoned the two. A local man told police he saw Barbara talking with youths in a car as Patricia watched. That night they went missing. One of the boys reportedly told Barbara, "You'll be sorry." Some years after the tragedy, Porgala ran into Loretta Grimes while shopping at a department store. Grimes recognized her and the two chatted. One of the first things Grimes said was, "Did you hear about my girls?" She died in 1989, never knowing what happened. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think happened? Who do you think was involved? Was it just a bunch of teenage boys causing problems? Do you think it was a mob-related incident? Or was it just accident? Let us know. Of course, give us a thumbs up if you like our video. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell notification button to be notified of future videos. And if you want to support the channel, you can go ahead and buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. Your support helps this channel grow. We can upgrade our equipment, bring in new hosts, be able to pay them, create even more content, and hopefully one day take this show on the road. Because hey, we'd love to live stream from crime destinations across the country, including Chicago, LA, New York. And we can't do that without support from our listener. But as always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time. As I've said countless times on this podcast, safety is an illusion. Even those of us who get strong gut feelings about certain people and situations struggle to follow those feelings and make decisions based on them. Gut feelings are usually right, but we worry that in following them, we are being judgmental or plain old silly. Even when we're surrounded by red flags, we don't always want to believe the worst. On February 2nd, 2008, 24-year-old Lindsay Buziak, a RE/MAX realtor from Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, was murdered on the job. When she was asked to show the house she was killed in, the job seemed too good to be true. Something was sketchy about the whole thing. But if Lindsay had sold the house, she would earn a massive commission, earn some prestige, and advance her career. Some risks are worth taking, and the odds of being in danger were so slim, it didn't seem to make sense to turn it down. Who arranged for Lindsay Buziak to show that house on that particular day? Why were they determined to make it the last showing of her life? If you're a good realtor, you can earn an impressive living. Often, all it takes to line your pockets and move up in the realty world is one big sale. Lindsay Buziak thought her moment had arrived. On January 31st, 2008, Lindsay's phone rang. On the other line was the voice of a woman with a heavy foreign accent. That in itself was not strange, but Lindsay couldn't help but think the accent sounded fake. Equally strange was the fact that Lindsay had received the call on her personal cell phone rather than her work line at the office. The woman on the other end of the line explained that she had been given Lindsay's number by one of Lindsay's other clients. Skeptical, Lindsay phoned the other client, but she could not confirm the caller's story because the client was out of town. The whole thing was odd, but when she found out that the house she would be showing was listed at $964,000, she felt it would be foolish to pass up such an opportunity. Still, Lindsay was uncomfortable enough that she asked her boyfriend, Jason Zalo, to meet her at the house in case there were any problems. In fact, Jason offered several times to do the showing for her, but her suspicions weren't strong enough to hand the reins over to her boyfriend. On February 2nd, Lindsay and Jason met around 4:30 for a late lunch. They went their separate ways after the meal. After lunch, Jason picked up his friend Cohen Oaten, and the two played in a scrub hockey game. Later, they stopped at an auto business. Surveillance cameras captured the two arriving and leaving. Then the men left to meet Lindsay at the house on De Sousa Place. De Sousa Place is a small cul-de-sac with only 4 houses. All of them were vacant, the perfect place to commit a violent crime. The house that Lindsay was showing was a 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom house that had stood empty on the market for more than a year. The client that contacted Lindsay specifically stated that her family was looking for a new empty house that was ready to move in. Just before 5:30 p.m., Lindsay pulled into the driveway, gathered her paperwork to go over the details of the house, and entered the home. It was 5:29 when Lindsay retrieved the realtor's key from the lockbox outside the door. However, the street was not without witnesses, as the killer or killers had likely hoped. 2 neighbors spotted a man and a woman walk towards the house. Not sure where the neighbors came from, since everything I've been able to see or hear or read said that the cul-de-sac was empty. Lindsay and the couple introduced themselves and went into the house. The man was described as being approximately 6 feet tall with dark hair, while the woman, a blonde, was clad in a distinctive patterned dress. The couple appeared to be between the ages of 35 and 45. Unfortunately, the dress was not a unique designer brand and was sold at numerous stores, so it was impossible to nail down where it came from. At this point, Jason texted Lindsay to let her know he would be there within 10 to 15 minutes. She replied and told him that the couple had arrived. At 5:38 p.m., Jason texted Lindsay again to tell her he was only a couple minutes away. But Lindsay never got the chance to read his text. Jason and Cohen pulled up to the property at 5:40 and witnessed a man and woman exit the house. As soon as they saw Jason and Cohen, the couple turned and went back into the house. The men waited in the car for about 20 minutes before Jason texted Lindsay. Again, he received no response. Jason then tried to enter the house, but the front door was locked. This is a big no-no among realtors, and being a realtor himself, this concerned Jason deeply. Peering through the windows, Jason could see Lindsay's shoes, and his concern turned into a panic. Cohen was able to get into the house through a back door while Jason dialed 911. Cohen opened the front door to let Jason in, so Jason ended the 911 call. Seeing no sign of Lindsay, Jason raced upstairs where he found Lindsay dead in a pool of blood. He immediately dialed 911 again. Lindsay had been stabbed more than 40 times. Investigators found no defensive wounds, which led them to believe she must have been ambushed when she had her back turned to her killers. There were no signs of sexual assault, and none of her personal belongings had been taken. This was a very personal crime. Lindsay's attackers had been careful not to leave behind any fingerprints or usable DNA at the scene. This seemed to suggest that Lindsay was murdered by a professional killer who had enough experience to know how to do the deed without leaving investigators so much as a breadcrumb of evidence to work with. A call had been placed from Lindsay's BlackBerry to an acquaintance, but all that could be heard was a muffled sound. Police believe the call was accidentally placed during the attack. With no physical footprints to trace, the first order of business for investigators was tracking the cell phone used by the woman to call Lindsay to set up a showing. The phone was a prepaid cell phone that had been purchased in late November 2007 and activated in late January 2008 in Vancouver. Whoever used the phone had only brought it into the Vancouver area 24 hours before Lindsay's murder. The calls themselves were made from Vancouver. Hits from the cell towers in the area show at least a half a dozen calls were made to Lindsay before her death, but the phone was never used again after she was murdered. Investigators concluded that somebody close to Lindsay planned the killing and hired somebody to carry it out. Inspector Rob McCall said on the third anniversary of Lindsay's death, quote, "Having had this on our plate for more than 2 years, we had plenty of time to develop theories, look at them closely, think outside of the box." Following Lindsay's murder, an anonymous call was placed at 911 asking authorities to check on the home Lindsay was showing. But just days after the killing, the police revealed that a second 911 call had come from inside the house as well. The person who made the second 911 call indicated that a person inside the house might be dead. So let's dive into some theories. Who would want a young, beautiful, budding professional dead so badly that they'd extensively plan a murder and hire a pro to do the dirty work? Well, top of the list, you gotta look at Jason Zalo. Whenever a woman is murdered, first person the police look at as a possible suspect is a husband or boyfriend. Since Lindsay's boyfriend, Jason, may have been present when Lindsay was killed, all eyes immediately focused on him as the potential killer. The two had been dating for about a year and lived together. While the relationship appeared to be a happy one from the outside, Lindsay was reportedly trying to decide if there was a future for her and Jason. Jason, it seems, could be quite controlling and possessive, and this rubbed Lindsay, a highly independent person, the wrong way. His need to dominate her life ran counterintuitive to her ambitious nature. Jason and Cohen were taken into custody following the discovery of Lindsay's body, but were soon released after time-stamped surveillance footage confirmed their version of events. Jason agreed to take a lie detector test and passed. The police removed him from the suspect list. What about the woman who knew too much? During an interview, Jason told police he might have some insight into what led to his girlfriend's murder, though he wasn't involved in the killing. He said that on December 14th, 2007, Lindsay visited him in Calgary and told him she saw something bad. He believed she was referring to something that occurred in Victoria. It's worth noting that Lindsay also told her father she had seen something she shouldn't have at the end of 2006. Through a bit of digging, the police discovered that Lindsay had contacted an old friend over both phone and Facebook over the period when Jason was in Calgary. The friend was a relative of a man named Erickson Lopez. I'm just going to say D. However, they could not determine why she contacted him. But what happened to Erickson just days before Lindsay's murder could shed light on what happened to Lindsay and why. Erickson, as it turned out, was charged in the largest cocaine trafficking ring case in Alberta history. It was shortly after Lindsay left Calgary and returned to Victoria that Erickson and his cocaine trafficking ring got busted. Lindsay was not known to be involved in drugs, but had she seen something that might have made her a danger to Erickson and his trafficking ring? Did they feel the need to eliminate her as a witness? Could the murder have been a revenge hit? Millions of dollars worth of cocaine were discovered and seized during the bust, and a lot of people lost money. Might Erickson and his associates have believed that Lindsay was the person who tipped off the police? The police also dug into Lindsay's past dating history to see if an ex-boyfriend might have had a long-standing beef with her. They came across the name of Matt McDuff. Investigators did not suspect him of the killing, but knew that when Matt and Lindsay lived together, their phones were tapped because of Matt's association with Jas Singh Bains, a man involved in the trafficking and sale of illegal narcotics. In fact, Jas headed up a Victoria-based criminal organization involved in shipping kilograms of cocaine to the Toronto area. He had earned himself a reputation for being the kingpin of organized crime on the west coast of Canada. He trafficked illegal narcotics into British Columbia and Alberta. Through tapping Lindsay and Jason's phones, the police learned that information that led to the British Columbia legislature raids in 2003. Despite Lindsay's connections to drug traffickers, there was no evidence to suggest that Lindsay herself ever used or sold drugs. According to True Crime Daily, the theory that the drug bust in Victoria had something to do with Lindsay is one the police are taking seriously. And next up, a confession. After Lindsay's murder, her father, Jeff Buziak, launched a website designed to aid in catching his daughter's killer. On August 6, 2017, somebody publicly posted the following comment to the site. Quote, "I killed Lindsay and stupid cops will never prove it, so y'all got nothing." Whoever wrote the comment is obviously a deeply disturbed person, but was the comment written by an associate of Lindsay's, or was it just a demented joke? According to the National Post, a list of local people included in the since-removed message who have been linked to Buziak suggests the author is at least familiar with the case. The comment continues, quote, "No one gives a shit anymore, anyhow, except her crybaby dad. Even her fakey girlfriends have washed it away. Typical loser chicks. Saanich cops dropped it because they can't solve shit. We're told to drop it. Cut the phony investigation. It's done. Go home, losers. Forget about her. The street always rules. Bitches die every day." Well, the commenter who couldn't spell his way out of a paper bag is clearly wrong that no one, quote, "gives a shit anymore. Otherwise, I wouldn't be recording this episode and you wouldn't be listening to this." Jeff Buziak responded to the crazy message saying, quote, "I read it, I went through my various gyrations, and then I copied and pasted it, sent it to the police. I'm not here to debate whether the post is real or from a bad guy or not. You got a lead, go investigate it and let the police determine it, not the armchair quarterbacks. It's either from the guy who's really kind of kooking out a bit and taunting, or it's from some crackhead, or it's someone just fucking around. But I don't care. I asked the police to get to the bottom of it." And now we're going to dive into some new developments as of 2020. In October 2020, documents related to the Buziak case were unsealed, revealing new information to the public for the first time. So we're going to take a look at some of the more important items of interest that were brought to light. Starting off with the mysterious phone call. As we previously discussed, when Lindsay received the first phone call about the showing at the house, Lindsay asked the woman how she found her and how she got her personal cell phone number. The woman would only tell her that she had been referred to Lindsay. But when Lindsay called around to find out which of her colleagues had referred her, no one knew anything about it. In the documents, there was no mention of the referral client who Lindsay supposedly tried to contact, but she was on vacation. And then planning an escape. When Lindsay recommended the home on De Souza Place during the 10-minute call with the unknown caller, the caller may have used MapQuest for the purpose of familiarizing themselves with the area and planning escape routes. At 7:15 p.m. on the same day, February 1st, Jason's mother, Shirley, showed up at the condo shared by Lindsay and her son. The documents do not state why Shirley visited the couple, but she reportedly overheard a 15-minute phone conversation between Lindsay and the client. And next up is some strange online activity. The local police uncovered an odd pattern in Lindsay's online activity in the days leading up to her murder. They discovered missing chat messages and were unable to determine when the files had been deleted. At the time of Lindsay's death, Facebook was still very new, but Lindsay had an account. The police found that from January 24th, 2008 to February 3rd, 2008, quote, there were no messages from any of Buziak's 700 friends. Investigators said they found the lack of activity very odd, but don't know what or if it has anything to do with the case. Next, the discovery of some shady characters in Lindsay's Facebook friends. Upon examining Lindsay's Facebook friends list, investigators quickly spotted the names of people who were violent criminals and involved in the legal distribution of drugs. Those names are heavily redacted in the report, but the local police at first believed that Buziak's association with them may have played a role in her murder. And next up, uncomfortable until the very end. On the day Lindsay was killed, she stopped at Remax's Chatterton Way office where she worked. The receptionist told police that even though Lindsay was to show the house on De Sousa Place that day, she was still feeling really weird and freaked out about the showing. So freaked out, in fact, that she gave the client's phone number to the receptionist and another coworker to see if they could find a record with other agents in Victoria. Unfortunately, they were unsuccessful. Next up, the killers escaped on foot. When Jason and Cohen arrived at the house, they saw Lindsay's BMW in the parking lot, but they didn't see any other cars on the street. This is consistent with the police's statement that the couple that killed Lindsay fled on foot. After waiting for about 10 minutes, Jason discovered the front door was locked and proceeded to ring the doorbell, quote, about 10 times with no answers. Next up, possibly more than one conspirator? The phone that was used to arrange the showing with Buziak was determined to be a prepaid phone registered to Paulo Rodriguez, a fake name. Cell tower information shows the area where the phone was purchased and where the person or people who purchased it were most likely from. Police also determined there was a second prepaid phone that was used to check the first phone's voicemail, leading investigators to surmise that there were two conspirators. The Saanich police were eventually able to figure out the owner of both phones, but the name is still redacted in the report. It's evident that whoever killed Lindsay Buziak was afraid of something. It certainly wasn't random. It appears Lindsay's death was the result of her seeing and or knowing something she wasn't supposed to. But it was something she was not directly involved in. If you want to dig even deeper into this case, because we could be talking about this for hours, head on over to the website that Lindsay's father made at lindsaybuziakmurder.com. I'll have a link to it in the description. It's a bit difficult to follow, but the site delves deeper into even more potential suspects, motives. There is no such thing as the perfect crime, but the conspirators in the Lindsay Buziak case have thus far done a damn good job of hiding their identities and their reasons for snuffing out the life of a beautiful young woman with a promising future. And the reasons for snuffing out the life of a beautiful young woman with a promising future. And now on to our pod deck segment. Today's question is, why do you think that the most common way for a woman to murder someone is poison? Depending on the type of poison, I think it's because they don't have the guts to come face to face with the person they want to kill and do it personally. Because, like people have said, if you stab someone, it's definitely personal because you're doing it up close. Whereas, like, if you shoot somebody, you could be a good distance away. But then a poison, you just spike their food or the drink or whatever it is, and you can walk away and be home at the time that they finally die from their poison. So you're not really facing them. So I think they don't have the... so in the general, I don't think they have the guts to face their targets. But let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Why do you think women choose to poison people over other forms of murder? And also let us know your thoughts on Lindsay Buziak murder. Do Do you have any theories? Who do you think is responsible? Do you think it's drug related? And hey, give us a thumbs up if you like our video. Subscribe to the channel, hit that bell notification button to be notified of future videos. And hey, go listen to us on Good Pods. And as always, thank you so much for watching and listening. And if you want to support the channel, go ahead and buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. Your support helps the channel grow, even if it's just $1. Every dollar you help can help us grow, can bring in new hosts that we can pay them with. So thank you so much for watching and listening, and thank you for your support. We'll see you next time.
In today's episode, we'd like to remind you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. Just search True Crime Never Sleeps Podcast. Without further ado, let's dive in today's Cold Case Friday episode, The Suspicious Disappearance of Jodi Huisentruit. The disappearance of a beloved news anchor remains unsolved to this day. Some claim that the authorities covered up what happened, and there is currently a $25,000 reward for the location of Jodi's remains. On June 5th, 1968, in Lone Prairie, Minnesota, the family of Maurice and Imogen Huisentruit grew at the birth of their youngest daughter, Jodi. In high school, Jodi found a love for golfing and was considered a promising talent. Her team won back-to-back Class A tournaments in 1985 and 86. After high school, Jodi went to St. Cloud State University, studying mass communications and speech communication. She graduated with a bachelor's degree in 1990. Her first job was with Northwest Airlines, but her career in the news began with CBS affiliate KGAN in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. She would work as the Iowa City bureau chief for a little while before moving back to Minnesota for a job with ABC affiliate KSAX in Alexandria. Her final job came in 1993 when she returned to Iowa to work as a television news anchor, CBS affiliate KIMT in Mason City. On June 26, 1995, Jodi and her friends had just returned from a water skiing trip, Iowa City. It was around 9 a.m. when Jodi attended the annual Mason City Chamber of Commerce golf tournament fundraiser. She and the rest of her golf team briefly played at the Highland Park golf course until they were rained out. They went to socialize at the clubhouse. Around mid-afternoon, Jodi headed home to change into dry clothes before attending an awards dinner at the Mason City Country Club. During dinner, Jodi told her friends about her annoyance towards the random phone calls she had been getting. She planned on changing her phone number to stop them. By 8 p.m., Jodi left the dinner, calling her friend in Mississippi while traveling back home. The friend's husband later described Jodi as sounding cheerful. After this, the rest of her Monday is unclear. But a friend, John, told police that Jodi went to his home that evening. He showed her the videotape he had taken of her surprise 27th birthday that he had hosted earlier in the month. The following morning, around 3 a.m. on June 27th, Jodi wasn't at work like she was meant to be. When an hour passed and Jodi still wasn't at work, producer Amy Kunz called her. Thankfully, Jodi was alright. She had simply overslept and would immediately make the 5-minute drive from her apartment. Despite her promise of being there shortly, Jodi didn't show. 5 a.m. passed, then 6 a.m. came. Amy had to anchor the hour-long newscast, Daybreak, for Jodi. Once that was over and Jodi still wasn't at work, staff contacted Mason City Police, requesting them to perform a welfare check. Around 7:15 a.m., police arrived outside the apartment, and right away it was clear something terrible happened. Jodi's new red Mazda Miata was still parked outside the building. Besides, it showed unmistakable signs of a struggle. There were drag marks on the pavement, Jodi's car key was bent, and her high heels, blow-dryer, and earrings lay scattered on the ground. Investigators even found a partial palm print on the vehicle. Nothing looked out of place inside her apartment, leading officers to believe that whoever attacked Jodi did so while she was unlocking her car door. Interviews from neighbors revealed several of them had heard a woman scream around 4:30 a.m. They didn't think much of it and decided against calling the police.
a person that lived up the street from the apartment complex, reported seeing a light-colored mid-80s Ford Econoline van parked in the lot with the lights on and engine running as he drove by at 4:30 a.m. John Vancies arrived at the crime scene, telling the police about the evening before when Jody went to his home the previous weekend of water skiing in Iowa City that he, Jody, and a few other friends went on. Search teams were assembled within hours of the initial call, and the immediate area was searched. That would expand to a further 2 miles. They found nothing. Jody had vanished from beside her car in the early morning hours without any solid evidence left behind. In September, the Huisentruit family hired a private investigator from McCarthy & Associates Investigative Services Incorporated from Minneapolis, Minnesota. They would enlist the help of Omaha, Nebraska-based private investigator Doug Jossa. McCarthy and Jossa appeared on national TV shows including America's Most Wanted and Unsolved Mysteries. In November, McCarthy, Jossa, and Jody's family traveled to Los Angeles, California to meet with 3 prominent psychics. The meetings was televised and served as the pilot episode for Psychic Detectives. All of the shows generated leads, but none would result in any concrete evidence or a suspect. In May 1996, around 100 volunteers searched part of Cerro Gordo County, leaving behind flags that they deemed suspicious. Law enforcement then went through every flagged site and searched the area. Once again, no solid evidence was located. Throughout the entire investigation, police and private investigators conducted over 100 interviews, but none resulted in a single piece of conclusive evidence. After 6 years of nothing, Jody Huisentruit was legally declared dead in May 2001. The FindJody.com site was created in 2003 by Minnesota TV journalists John Benson and Gary Peterson. Their goal was to keep Jody's case in the spotlight and serve as a clearinghouse for tips. Their goal was aided by the arrival of the 10th anniversary of Jody's disappearance. The media began recirculating the case. In one of the interviews she did at this point in time, Jody's mother said she believed her daughter was at the bottom of a lake near her home. Similarly, Jody's cousins revealed their theory that Jody was being stalked by a man who kidnapped her. The next event in the case came in early June 2008 when 84 photocopied pages of Jody's personal journal were mailed to local papers. Mason City Globe-Gazette received a large envelope with no return address and a June 4th postmark for Waterloo. The original diary is in possession of law enforcement and had been since the beginning of the case, meaning someone within the force leaked the pages. Just days after Mason City Police revealed that the sender came forward, she was the wife of a former Mason City Police chief. He had taken a copy of the journal home when he had left the office. No motive was given as to why the wife sent the documents. In December 2016, an opinion piece was written for the Northwest Iowa Review. The author was a retiring state representative, John Cooker of Sioux County. He described his experience with the case as a member of the Iowa State House Public Safety Committee, and in the piece, he suggested that Jody's disappearance was subjected to a cover-up by Mason City officials. Not much else followed this, but in the following March, the first search warrant was in the case was issued. The warrant was for the GPS of 2 vehicles owned by John Vancies. As of 2020, the Mason City Police Department and the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation are still investigating Jody's disappearance. Find Jody also launched a podcast by the same name to try and garner a new audience to share the information with. And in 2022, ABC 2020 debuted a new special, Gone at Dawn, overviewing Jody's disappearance and re-interviewed those close to her. This was the 3rd time ABC's 2020 included Jody's disappearance on the show. With permission of Jody's sister, private investigator Steve Ridge set a reward of $25,000 for any information that leads to the recovery of Jody's remains. The reward does not require an arrest or conviction. This came in February 2023 and is still active to this day. Ridge asked any information be directed to the Mason City Police Department at 641-421-3636. That number, if you have information, is 641-421-3636. Now let us know your theories in the comments section below in this case. Is there something we got wrong, something we got right? Let me know. And of course, keep the conversation going in the comments section with your theories, comments, concerns, And of course, if you want to support the channel, you can go ahead and buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. Your support helps the channel grow, upgrade our equipment, bring in new hosts, and be able to take this show on the road. We'd love to be able to live stream episodes from places like Mason City, California, crime scenes in New York, Chicago, Texas, Florida, and your support can help make that happen. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.
Before we dive into today's episode, we'd like to remind you can find us on Facebook, Twitter. Just search True Crime Never Sleeps Podcast. And as always, give us a thumbs up if you like our video. Without further ado, let's dive into the suspicious death of Charles C. Morgan. On March 22nd, 1977, Charles Morgan, 29-year-old escrow agent in Tucson, Arizona, went missing after leaving his home, seemingly abducted on the way to his escrow company. 3 days later, at 2 a.m., he finally returned home. His wife, Ruth Morgan, reported that he had a plastic handcuff around one ankle and handcuffs around his hands. He pointed to indicate that he couldn't speak. Ruth gave him a pen and paper and wrote that there was a hallucinogenic drug in his throat that could destroy his nervous system. Ruth wanted to call the police or get in contact with a physician, but Charles told her not to. Instead, it would put their family in danger. Ruth resigned to nursing him back to health, after which he told her that for the past 2 or 3 years, he had been working as a secret agent for the Treasury Department. He claimed his abductors took his Treasury ID, giving her no more details. On July 5th, 1865, the U.S. Secret Service was formed to catch counterfeiters. In 1867, the mission of the Secret Service broadened to detecting persons perpetrating frauds against the government. It was part of the Department of Treasury until 2003 and is now part of the Department of Homeland Security. 2 months after Charles's disappearance, he was reported missing again. After 9 days, Ruth receives a phone call. An unidentified woman tells Ruth, quote, "Chuck is all right," Ecclesiastes 12, 1-8, and hangs up. 2 days later, on June 18th, his body is discovered lying 40 miles west of Tucson, near his Mercury Cougar. Charles C. Morgan had been shot in the back of the head by his own gun, a .357 caliber Magnum revolver. He was found wearing a bulletproof vest that he reportedly had been wearing after his first disappearance. A belt buckle that concealed a knife and a holster. A pair of sunglasses found at the scene were not his. Pima County Sheriff investigators searched his car and found several weapons and a cache of ammunition. The car had been reportedly altered so that it could be unloaded or unlocked from the fender. On the rear seat of the car, Morgan's tooth was discovered, wrapped up in a white handkerchief, and yet, that isn't the strangest thing investigators found at the scene. Bizarrely, there was also an item pinned to Morgan's underwear, a $2 bill with 7 Spanish surnames and a map of the border area. The map led to the town's Robles Junction in San City, an area between Tucson and Mexico. Those towns had a reputation for smuggling at the time, a fact that will become important later. Above the list of the surnames was the note Ecclesiastes 12, and arrows pointing to numbers 1 and 8 within the bill's serial number. Some of the writings on the bill had alleged Masonic references. Charles also had a piece of paper with directions to the site where he was found. The directions were in his handwriting. Medical investigators say he had been dead for only 12 hours when he was found. Strangely, there were no fingerprints found at the scene, not even on the gun. On Morgan's hand, they found gunpowder. It's likely for this reason the sheriff's department labeled it a suicide. For years, that seemed to be the end of the Charles C. Morgan case, a supposed suicide with twisted clues that seemed to suggest otherwise. And before we dive into the theories, go ahead and leave us a comment in the comment section below. What do you think is happened to Charles C. Morgan? Was it a suicide, or was there something else? And do you believe he was a agent for the Treasury Department? Let us know. And of course, hit that subscribe button and bell notification button to be notified of our next episode. So our first main theory is Morgan's death was in fact a suicide. There was gunpowder on his hand, and the gun used was his own, yet Morgan was right-handed, and the gunpowder residue was on his left hand. It doesn't make sense for him to use his left hand to shoot himself in the back of the head, let alone use such an awkward position to kill himself. Furthermore, the crime scene suggests the presence of someone else, such as Morgan's tooth, the pair of sunglasses that didn't belong to him, and the bizarre $2 bill. Our next theory was Morgan was killed due to being in the Secret Service. It should be noted that Morgan was not definitively in the Secret Service, but if he was, as he said to his wife, it's possible that this led to his murder. Morgan allegedly had done escrow work for organized crime families. Shortly before his death, Morgan had also testified in a secret state investigation on illegal activity on both sides of the Arizona-Mexico border. He was a reluctant witness for the Arizona Attorney General's office in the questioning of a now-closed Tucson bank. Was Morgan alluding to this case when he told his wife he had been undercover with the Treasury Department? One of Morgan's daughters, Megan, stated, quote, "My father had a lot of information about people here in Tucson that could have been very detrimental. There was a lot of information about politicians, people who are still alive that work in the government. He had that information, and they wanted to silence him." Another theory: Morgan was murdered due to other illicit activities. 2 days after Morgan's death, a woman who called herself Green Eyes called the Pima County Sheriff's Department and claimed to be the same woman who had contacted Morgan's wife before. Green Eyes said that she had met Morgan in a motel before he died. Pima County Sheriff Department had confirmed that Morgan had been staying in a West Side motel for over a week before he was shot. Green Eyes said that Charles showed her a briefcase full of thousands in cash, which he claimed was to buy him out of a contract that the mob put on his life. Following her husband's death, Ruth had a visit from 2 men claiming to be the FBI. She said that they flashed their identification quickly and tore the house apart and left, but she never learned what they were looking for or if they found it. Almost 13 years after his death on February 7th, 1990, an episode of Unsolved Mysteries covering the Charles C. Morgan case aired. This sparked a flux of incoming calls that helped Don Devereaux, a journalist for Unsolved Mysteries, piece together that Morgan had been involved in money laundering, large transactions with gold and platinum that would occur regularly between 1973 and his death in 1977. Morgan was dealing with upwards of $1 billion worth of gold alone. There were also perhaps undercover CIA agents involved, most likely to pocket money for themselves. Allegedly, exiled Vietnamese government officials were involved, as well as people from the Department of Defense. Morgan was also linked to a money laundering scheme with fraudulent real estate, and one of Morgan's clients was a mafia crew centered around Joseph Bonanno. Devereaux also found that Morgan kept copies of all the illicit transactions made, thinking they could save him in the future. Were these paper trails of illegal transactions the reason why Morgan was killed? Perhaps leading credence to the idea that Morgan was silenced, a similar crime occurred around the airing of the Unsolved Mysteries episode that exposed most of Morgan's criminal activity. On May 14th, 1990, at 11 p.m., Phoenix, Arizona resident Doug Johnston left for his night shift at a computer graphics company. He was found dead an hour later in his company's parking lot, slumped in the front seat of his car, having been shot once behind the left ear. It was determined that the gun had been at least 12 inches away from Doug when it went off. Like Morgan, authorities believe that Doug committed suicide. However, Doug was right-handed, and the bullet was behind the left ear. No gun or gun residue was found at the scene of the crime. 25 caliber bullet casing was found. The medical examiner said that the shot could have been self-inflicted or the work of someone else. Doug's widow said he would have never committed suicide. Curiously, Don Devereaux, the journalist who previously investigated Charles Morgan's case for Unsolved Mysteries, lived across the street from the site where Doug Johnston was found. Another interesting shared aspect between the two: Johnston's car, a Toyota station wagon, was very similar to Devereaux's. Around this time, Devereaux had a conversation with another journalist who had received a warning from the CIA. Journalists learned from a trusted CIA source that the killing of Doug Johnston was a botched job, and that the bullet was meant for Devereaux. This CIA authority had also claimed that there were contracts out for Devereaux's death. These threats may have occurred because of Devereaux looking into the death of Charles Morgan. Further backing up the idea that people looking into Morgan were being silenced, a writer from Washington, D.C., named Don Castellaro, had reached out to Devereaux asking for information on Morgan's gold transactions. Before Devereaux could send the information, Dan was found dead in a hotel room in the bathtub with his wrist cut deeply approximately a dozen times. Police ruled it a suicide. Dan's brother, a doctor, said that Dan was so squeamish he would barely let his brother prick his finger for any blood work, which does not add up with Dan Castellaro's method of suicide. Devereaux believes that the same people involved in 1970s activities are still out there. They perhaps silenced Morgan and writer Dan Castellaro, and perhaps tried and failed to silence Devereaux. Let us know your thoughts in this case in the comments section below. What do you think really happened? Give us your take, and keep the conversation going in the comments section below. As always, if you want to support the channel, you can go ahead and buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. Your support helps the channel grow, upgrade our equipment, bring in new hosts, be able to pay them, and of course, take this show on the road, because we would love to be able to live stream from true crime locations like the O.J. Simpson neighborhood or crime scenes on the East Coast, or perhaps take a trip to across the pond for some Jack the Ripper content. And you can help make that happen. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. Don't forget to find us on Good Pods. Leave us a review.
We hope you enjoy the videos we are providing you this year. And as always, please consider supporting the channel so we can keep this content growing. You can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. And as always, give us a thumbs up, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell notification button to be notified of future videos. If you can't afford to give, we understand during this holiday season, consider just leaving us a review or a comment or a like, or send us a tweet and let us know where you're watching from. Before we dive into today's episode of Cold Case Files, we'd like to remind you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Just search the True Crime Never Sleeps podcast. And now on to today's episode of Cold Case Files. Where is Sarah Bushland? She vanished without a trace after getting off the school bus in 1996. Sarah Bushland had been in a good mood when she left her Spring Lake, Wisconsin home on the morning of Wednesday, April 3rd, 1996. It was the last day of classes before spring break. It was also the 15-year-old's first day of freedom after being grounded for several weeks. One of her stepbrothers dropped her off at a friend's house in Spooner, Wisconsin that morning, and the two of them walked to Spooner High School together. The first half of the school day passed by quickly for Sarah. Her boyfriend Travis Lane picked her up at lunchtime, and the two of them went out to eat. After lunch, Travis dropped her back off at the school, and she attended her afternoon classes. Sarah had intended to walk back to her friend's house with her once the school day ended, as the two of them planned on returning to the school together later that evening for an event being held there. By the end of the day, however, Sarah had changed her mind. She told her friend that she needed to return to her own house first and asked several people if they could give her a ride. Sarah's home was located on the outskirts of the rural community of Spooner. When she was unable to find anyone willing to drive her there, she decided to take the school bus. Sarah's bus ride home usually took around 40 minutes, and she spent the time chatting with other students on the bus. One of them noticed that there was a dark pickup truck that appeared to be following the bus. She recognized it as belonging to a man that Sarah used to date. Sarah got off at her usual bus stop located near the bottom of the gravel driveway that led to her home. Several witnesses saw the dark-colored pickup truck pull into Sarah's driveway. From Sarah's body language, it was clear that she knew the driver. Although all the witnesses saw Sarah approach the driver and start talking to him, it's unclear if she actually got into the truck with him or not. A couple of the witnesses thought Sarah did climb into the truck, while another recalled seeing Sarah speak with the driver, but nothing else. The only thing known for certain is that Sarah was never seen again. The truck was seen backing out of Sarah's driveway as the bus pulled away. One witness said the truck then headed north direction of Trago, while another claimed it went south. Neither witness could tell if Sarah was in the truck or not. She may have started the 100-yard walk up the driveway to her house. Sarah got off the bus at 4 p.m. The only person who had been home at that time was her 20-year-old stepbrother, David. Her mother, Marie, had to go out of town for a funeral and planned on spending the night in Chippewa Falls, while her stepfather, Jim Lambert, was visiting a friend in Minnesota. Sarah's stepbrother noticed that Sarah didn't arrive home from school and called his father in Minnesota at 4:37 p.m. to report that Sarah wasn't home. It's unclear if he thought she was still grounded or not, since Sarah had initially planned on going to a friend's house after school. There was no reason for anyone to expect her to be home. Jim called his wife in Chippewa Falls and told her that Sarah apparently hadn't returned home from school. Unsure what was going on, Marie immediately made the drive back to Spooner, arriving around 6:20 p.m. She began calling around to some of Sarah's friends, but none of them had seen her since they left school. At 8 p.m., Marie started driving around various places where she thought Sarah might be. She went to the home where Sarah had been dropped off that morning, as well as Travis's apartment, but Sarah wasn't at either location. Travis told Marie that he had eaten lunch with Sarah, but hadn't seen her since he dropped her back off at school. Several of Sarah's classmates confirmed that Sarah had returned to school after lunch and had then taken the bus home. Marie finally went home and spent a sleepless night wondering where her daughter might be. According to Jim, he returned from Minnesota early the following afternoon. He and Marie then drove to the Spooner police station and reported Sarah missing. From the initial report, it appears that the couple believed that Sarah had simply run away. Since they didn't seem particularly concerned, the police did little to look for Sarah. Her disappearance got no publicity at all. Many of her classmates weren't even aware of the fact that she was missing until 2 weeks after she was last seen. Curiously, Marie didn't bother to call Sarah's father to tell him that his daughter was missing. Mike Bushland learned of her disappearance a few days later when his former mother-in-law called him. From the start, he was convinced that Sarah wasn't a runaway. She hadn't taken any of her belongings. All her clothing, makeup, and hair products were left behind. Sarah had only been living in Spooner since December 1994. Prior to this, she had been living in Colorado with her father and older sister, Leslie. The sisters were only 18 months apart in age and had always been close. Their parents divorced in 1984 and shared joint custody of the girls for much of their childhood. When Mike relocated to Colorado in 1990, both girls had opted to move with him. Mike did everything he could to give his daughters a stable home life, and things seemed to be going well. As the sisters entered their teenage years, they started to act out a little. Leslie got a thrill out of shoplifting, though she never really took anything of value. Soon, Sarah decided to try her hand at it, but she wasn't as discreet about it. In November 1994, she was arrested for being caught shoplifting at a local mall. Mike was understandably upset when he learned of his daughter's new hobby, and he grounded both of them. Sarah, in typical teenage fashion, reacted with anger and decided that she no longer wanted to live with her father. She wanted to go live with her mother and stepfather in Wisconsin. Mike agreed, and Sarah left Colorado the following month. Jim and Marie Lambert live on a 65-acre property along Spring Lake in Spooner, Wisconsin. Their home burned down in 1990, and rather than rebuild it, they converted their 2-story garage into a home. At that time, Sarah moved in with them. 2 of Jim's sons were also living there. Jim and Marie were seldom home. This created the kind of unstructured environment Sarah had been craving when she left her father's house. It came at a price. There were allegations of sexual abuse and tension between Sarah and her stepbrothers. No charges were ever filed, and it's unclear exactly what went on inside the Spooner home. Although Sarah was rarely supervised, she had very little privacy as her bedroom lacked a door and doubled as Jim's office. Sarah was known for her happy and outgoing personality, and she never had a problem making friends. When she moved to Spooner, however, she started hanging out with a group of friends who were much older than her. She was only 15 when she started dating Travis. He was 21 at the time. Jim and Marie weren't happy about this. They tried to tell Sarah she wasn't allowed to date until she turned 16. But Sarah continued to see Travis. Like most teenage girls, Sarah kept a diary. Although she only wrote in it sporadically, she did go into detail about some of the tension she felt with her stepfather and stepbrothers, as well as about some general relationship problems. In March 1996, Jim found and read her diary. He was angry about some of the things she had written and grounded her as a result.
It's unclear exactly what angered him, though the fact that Sarah was apparently still dating Travis was likely a factor. Sarah was only allowed to leave the house to go to school or school-related activities. Her punishment was due to end the day she went missing. Sarah had moved to Spooner because she had been angry when her father grounded her. Once her stepfather grounded her, she seemed to realize that life with her father had been pretty good. Shortly before she went missing, she told her grandmother that she was thinking about moving back in with her father and sister. The exact circumstances surrounding Sarah's disappearance have never been fully established. As she was trying to find a ride home from school that day, she told one of her friends that she was afraid her stepfather would read her diary again. She mentioned that she wanted to get home before this could happen. Yet Jim was supposed to be out of town on a planned overnight trip that day, meaning there was no risk of him finding and reading her diary. It's possible she was worried that one of her stepbrothers might find it and reveal its contents to her stepfather. But her exact thoughts are unknown. Although Sarah's father and older sister were convinced that she hadn't run away from home, police latched onto the runaway theory. As a result, there was no real investigation conducted. Mike was upset with the way that the case was handled, noting that no one from the sheriff's office had bothered to contact him until Sarah had been missing for more than a year. It was clear to him that they had never bothered to take a cursory look at her disappearance, let alone conduct an actual investigation. In July 1999, the Washburn County Sheriff's Office arrived at Jim and Marie's home at Spooner and conducted their first physical search for Sarah. Although they declined to name anyone in the family as a suspect or person of interest, they combed through a trash dump that was located on the property. They found nothing related to Sarah's disappearance. In August 2000, law enforcement conducted a second search on the Lambert property, this time armed with a search warrant. They dragged Spring Lake, searched through several other areas on the property, but once again left without finding anything. The fact that the Washburn County Sheriff's Office seemed to be concentrating their search efforts around Sarah's home was the subject of much speculation, but officials refused to comment about the case. The fact that they didn't seem too worried about finding the dark-colored pickup truck seen on that day Sarah disappeared seemed to indicate that they had discarded it as a lead. They appeared to believe Sarah had arrived that day and met her fate at her own house. After the second search of the Lambert property, the investigation seemed to stall. It would be more than a decade before another physical search would take place. Marie held on to the hope that her daughter had decided to voluntarily disappear and believed that she might return after her 18th birthday. The day came and went without any word from Sarah, and her father admitted that it was getting harder to stay positive. By the time Sarah had been missing for 5 years, law enforcement admitted that it appeared her disappearance had not been voluntary. Although they had no proof that foul play had taken place, they noted that they had no reason to believe Sarah was still alive. They received few leads about the case, likely since there was no publicity and few people seemed to know Sarah was missing. But they believed that there were people living in the Spooner area who knew exactly what had happened to the teenager. Although Sarah's case was always considered to be an active investigation, no progress was made on it for years. In 2013, police renewed their efforts at finding Sarah, starting off with yet another search of the Lambert's property in May 2013. More than 70 investigators spent 2 days scouring the entire property, including the home and all outbuildings. Cadaver dogs were brought in to assist, and they reacted to the smell of decomposition in several different areas. Despite the extensive search, officials once again left without any clues about what might have happened. Both Jim and Marie died in 2017. The Washburn County Sheriff's Office conducted a fourth search of their property just a week after Jim's death. Once again, searchers failed to find any evidence related to Sarah's disappearance. The truck that was seen at Sarah's driveway on the day she went missing has never been identified. One witness thought it looked like a truck belonging to the father of Sarah's boyfriend. Another recognized it as belonging to a man Sarah had referred to as Steve. There was no one named Steve known to be associated with Sarah. It's possible that both witnesses were referring to Travis. Either way, there is still no evidence that Sarah got into the truck that day. It may not be involved in her disappearance at all. The fact that the detectives seemed to fixate on the Lambert property suggests that they had evidence indicating that something happened to Sarah there, but they have never spoken publicly about this. Although they did not believe that Sarah is still alive, she is still considered a missing person at this time.
Sarah's father and sister have come to terms with the fact that she was almost certainly the victim of foul play, but they have never given up their search for her. Leslie has been extremely active in keeping Sarah's case alive and still hopes that they will one day learn what happened to her little sister. Sarah Bushland was 15 years old when she went missing in 1996. She's got blue eyes and blonde hair, and at the time of the disappearance, she was 5 feet tall and weighed 104 pounds. She was last seen wearing blue jeans, a t-shirt with a picture of Tweety Bird on the front, blue jacket, and black sneakers. She was also wearing 4 silver rings, including a Spooner High School class ring, with a black stone and wire-rimmed eyeglasses. If you have any information about Sarah, you're asked to contact the Washburn County Sheriff's Office at 715-468-4700. Let us know your thoughts on this case in the comments section below. What do you think happened? And of course, if you want to support the channel, go ahead, buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. Your support helps the channel grow, upgrade our equipment, bring in new hosts, be able to pay them, and one day take this show on the road. We'd love to be able to record live episodes from crime scenes like this, like travel to Spooner, Wisconsin, and have a live episode there, or record live from crime scenes in California, and you can make that happen. No matter how much you give, $1, $5, $50, $100, anything you give is appreciated and helps this channel grow. So once again, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. And as always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.